Hello everyone. I am the storyteller. Tonight, I'll tell you a story that waits where the ocean meets the runway, a tale not passed down in lullabies, but hidden in the hum of fluorescent lights and the hiss of automatic doors. Most travelers mistake it for jet lag, or a trick of the heat mirage. But I know better. Because I worked there. It began at Honolulu International Airport, a place that never really sleeps. Beneath the layovers and the tourist chatter, there's another shift, one you don't see on the schedule. A shift run by rules, guarded by cats with eyes like molten gold, and a hunger that doesn't fade with dawn. There, the house isn't a building. It's a presence. And every night, it tests who belongs. So settle in. Listen to the buzz of the lights, the soft padding of paws just out of sight. And learn what happens when you sweep a floor that never stays clean. And whatever you do, don't say her name. After my uncle's stroke, somebody had to cover the bills. That somebody turned out to be me. I was 27, with a patchy work history, a few years moving freight, some custodial shifts at nothing steady. My aunt couldn't work full-time and the medical debt piled higher than Diamond Head. So when a flyer went up on the union board saying security HNL International night shift $34.50 per hour, I didn't ask too many questions. It was more than double what I'd ever made before. That should have been a red flag. Instead, I thought, finally, a break. The application was weirdly easy. Just my name, phone number, and whether I had reliable transportation. No background check, no references. They called me the next day. Told me to report to the Ava concourse entrance at 6 p.m. sharp, ask for Mr. Kanoa, and he'd give me the guidelines I'd need to follow. They didn't call them rules. Guidelines. I figured it was just airport talk for training. Mr. Kanoa looked less like airport security and more like a fisherman who'd wandered in from the pier. Big shoulders, salt and pepper hair, skin leathery from years of sun. He handed me a laminated badge and a spiral-bound booklet. No handshake, just. You keep this with you. You follow every line. Don't test it. The booklet was titled in all caps, Operational Guidelines Night Security Division. The first page. 1. Do not acknowledge stray cats on airport property. Do not feed them. Do not attempt to chase them. If one crosses your path, stop and count backwards from 10 before moving. I thought it was a joke. Airports have rats, cats keep them down. Why the ritual? Kanoa must have seen my smirk because his eyes went hard. You want to see sunrise? You follow it. Every word. The airport at night. Honolulu International is loud by day, waves of Japanese tourists, military flights buzzing, the endless intercom in 3 languages. But at night? It goes hollow. Long concourses like empty ribs. Glass windows reflecting your own shadow. The palm trees outside twitching under sodium lights. My beat was the old inter-island terminal, mostly dark now except for a few red-eye departures. My job was simple, walk the halls, check doors, radio in on the hour. Easy money. Except for the cats. It was around 2:15 a.m. when I saw one. Black, slender, sitting right in the middle of the moving walkway, tail curled like a question mark. Its eyes were not green, not yellow, but something in between, bright as signal lamps. I remembered Rule 1. Don't acknowledge. Don't feed. Don't chase. If it crosses your path, count backwards from 10. I figured, what harm in testing? It's just a cat. So I stepped toward it. It didn't move. Just watched me. My footsteps echoed on the metal walkway, each one too loud in the empty terminal. I got close enough to see the fur ripple as if caught by a breeze, but there was no breeze in here. The radio on my belt hissed. A voice I didn't recognize whispered through static. Stop. I froze. The cat padded across my path, slow as royalty, then vanished into the service corridor. My chest hurt from holding breath. I counted backward from 10 anyway, heart hammering. The silence afterward was so total, I swore I heard my own blood moving. Back at the guard station, I flipped through more of the booklet. Rules, written in that same matter-of-fact tone. 2. Between 3:00–15 a.m., do not look at the glass windows facing the runways. If you see movement, it is not your reflection. 3. Do not answer intercom calls after 2:45 a.m. The system is disconnected. 4. If you hear scratching at the employee lounge door, do not open it. The lounge is empty at night. 5. Should you encounter an unattended child in the concourse, do not speak. Notify control, then walk away without turning your back. It read less like airport procedure and more like a bad campfire story. Still, the pay was real. The badge scanned real. And I'd already seen the cat. At 2:50, just before the no intercom rule, the PA system clicked on. Security to gate 13, please. Immediate assistance. The voice was wrong. Too smooth, like someone reading phonetics without understanding them. I checked my watch. 2:52. Rule said, do not answer intercom calls after 2:45. My finger hovered on the radio. Every instinct told me to answer what if it was a real emergency. But my skin remembered the cat. So I didn't. The PA crackled again, harsher this time. Security. Gate 13. Now. Then silence. 5 minutes later, the lights at gate 13 flickered. Just that gate. The others stayed steady. I stayed in my chair, gripping the booklet until my knuckles turned white. I don't know how long I dozed at the desk, but when I opened my eyes, the window was full of moonlight. And in the moonlight, pressed faint against the glass, was a shape. Not a cat. Bigger. Feminine outline, crowned with ears sharp as obsidian. Eyes burning like twin beacons. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Just waited, hands on the glass, as if testing its give. I shut my eyes and started counting backwards. 10. 9. 8. When I looked again, the glass was empty. That was my first night. I'm still on the job. Still alive, obviously. But if you're reading this because you saw the same posting, if you're thinking about taking the pay, listen to me. The cats aren't strays. The rules aren't optional. And if you ever hear a child laughing near the jet bridges after midnight, run. By the second night, the booklet felt less like training material and more like scripture. I kept it in my pocket, edges softening with sweat. I checked it every 30 minutes like it might change when I wasn't looking. I wasn't alone this time. They assigned me to split the concourse patrol with another guard, a wiry guy named Micah. Local, maybe mid-30s, tattooed forearms and a restless kind of energy, like he didn't believe in standing still. He laughed when he saw the spiral-bound booklet. You reading the gospel already? Don't let Kanoa spook you, Brada. Those guidelines are old airport superstition. Superstition? I asked. Yeah. Ghost stories for rookies. It's to make sure you stay awake. But trust me, the cats. They're just cats. Micah proved his point by pulling a packet of jerky from his pocket. Sure enough, one of the black cats padded out from under a bench, eyes flashing in the dark. Micah crouched, tore a strip of jerky, and whistled. The cat came closer. Stopped just short of the yellow safety line. Its tail lashed once, twice. I felt my throat tighten. Don't. He tossed the jerky. The cat didn't eat it. Didn't even sniff it. Just stared up at him, head cocked. Then it turned. Walked away into shadow. Micah grinned. See? Nothing. But when he turned back, his grin faltered. The jerky strip was gone. And in its place, neat on the tile, lay a single claw. Long, curved, black as obsidian. Micah picked it up before I could stop him. "Souvenir," he said. Around 3 a.m., I remembered Rule 2, don't look at the glass facing the runways between 3:003:15. So I kept my eyes low as we walked past the big terminal windows. Micah didn't. He slowed, peering out across the tarmac. "Hey. You see that?" I didn't answer. I just counted my steps. "Somebody's out there," he whispered. "Looks like a woman. Long hair. She's waving." My stomach turned to ice. "Don't look," I said, but he was already pressing his forehead to the glass. His breath fogged the window. When it cleared, there were 2 fog patches. His and hers. She was on the other side. Micah jerked back, cursed under his breath. The second fog patch lingered a few seconds longer, shaped like a delicate mouth exhaling. Then it was gone. We were almost through the patrol when I heard it, a soft giggle near gate 10. I froze. Checked my watch. 3:27 a.m. Micah looked at me, puzzled. "You hear that?" Another giggle. Higher, closer. Then footsteps. Small ones. Rule 5. Unattended child. Do not speak. Notify control. Walk away without turning your back. I grabbed the radio, whispered, "Control, gate 10. Possible unattended child." Static. The sound of bare feet pattering across the tiles. A little girl stepped into the glow of the emergency exit light. Couldn't have been more than 6. Hair in 2 braids, white dress hanging loose like hospital linen. She lifted her hand, palm outward. Micah whispered, "Where the hell did she come from?" The girl tilted her head. Opened her mouth but no sound came out. Just the wet click of a cat's tongue. My legs moved on their own. Backing up, slow, steady. Never turning. Micah did the opposite. He stepped forward. "Hey, kid, you lost?" Her mouth split into a wide grin, teeth too sharp, too many. And then every light in the concourse went out. When they flickered back on, the girl was gone. So was the claw Micah had tucked in his pocket. He looked shaken, skin gray under the fluorescence. But he tried to laugh it off. "Guess I shouldn't be talked, huh?" I wanted to tell him it wasn't funny. That he'd just traded something he couldn't get back. But before I could, the PA system crackled to life. Not the smooth voice from before. Not even human. This time it was a low purr, words slurred but clear enough. "Micah belongs to me." The intercom clicked off. Micah's hand shook so hard he dropped his flashlight. And I knew, deep down, this job wasn't about security. It wasn't about airports. It was about serving something older that had made this place hers. Something with eyes like lanterns and claws like obsidian. Micah didn't show up for the next night shift. That should have been a relief, but instead it gnawed at me. I kept thinking about that claw the way it had appeared, clean as a gift, and vanished when the lights went out. When I clocked in, Mr. Kanoa was waiting in the employee lounge. He almost never came around at night. He slid a paper across the table. Micah's time card, and signed. "You worked with him last?" he asked. I nodded. "Then you know why he won't be back." I hesitated. "Because he broke the rules." Kanoa's eyes hardened. "Because he forgot they weren't ours. They're hers." That was the first time he told me anything more than, "Follow the guidelines." According to Kanoa, before the airport was built, the land was kapu. Sacred. A crossing place. Not just for people, but for whatever moves between worlds. When the runways went down, something older woke up. Not Hawaiian. Older. It came with the cats. Maybe it always had. She's not evil, he said. She protects. But protection's not free. Cross her, and you'll see what side you're really on. He tapped the booklet in my hand. That's not training, boy. That's the treaty. That night, I walked the concourse alone. Every shadow looked heavier. Every window seemed to hold something behind the glass. At 3:04, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Instinct almost dragged my head toward the runway windows, but I forced my gaze down to the floor tiles. Counted my steps. 10. 11. 12. Something tapped the glass. Slow. Rhythmic. Like claws. I clenched my jaw, kept walking. When I reached the end of the hall, I risked one glance back. The glass was fogged with a perfect circle of breath. But no one was there. At 3:20, near gate 13, I heard footsteps. Heavy, dragging. Micah came out of the service stairwell. Same uniform, same tattoos, but something was wrong with his eyes. They didn't focus. They gleamed, catching light that wasn't there. "Hey," he rasped, voice raw. "Miss me?" I froze. He lifted his hand. The claw was back, jutting from his palm like it had grown into him. Blood trickled around the base, but he didn't seem to feel it. "I think she likes me better now," he whispered. Behind him, in the shadow of the stairwell, two smaller eyes blinked open. Cat's eyes. No bigger. Higher. Watching us both. A laugh echoed down the concourse. That same giggle from the night before. Micah's head snapped toward it, jerking like a puppet's. She brought friends. My radio hissed, urgent. Control to gate 13. Do not engage. Do not acknowledge. I stumbled backward. Micah advanced. Each step left a dark smear on the tiles, like ink or oil. From the corner by gate 10, the little girl appeared again. Same braids, same too-wide smile. She lifted her hands, and two black cats padded at her sides like escorts. I remembered Rule 5. Don't speak. Don't turn your back. So I did the only thing I could, I kept my eyes locked on her, and I walked away. Slow. Steady. My chest screaming to run. Micah laughed, low and broken. You can't keep walking forever. When I passed the windows, I couldn't help it, I glanced. The woman from before was there. Not fog this time, not suggestion. A full shape pressed against the glass. Tall, sleek, crowned with cat ears. Her mouth moved, and for a heartbeat I swore I heard the purr right behind my skull. Then the glass spiderwebbed with cracks. I bolted. Guidelines or not, I ran. When the sun came up, Micah was gone. No record he'd clocked in. No trace on the cameras. But on the tiles near gate 13, someone had scratched deep into the linoleum. 3 marks, parallel, long as my forearm. I asked Kanoa if it was her. He shook his head. Not her. Her children. That's when I realized the guidelines weren't just about keeping her out. They were about keeping the rest of us in. I stopped sleeping after Micah. Not really. I'd close my eyes for an hour, maybe 2, but the dreams were worse than staying awake. Cats crawling across the ceiling. A child's giggle echoing down empty terminals. The crack of glass, always about to give way. Still, I kept showing up. You don't walk away from $34.50 an hour, not when your uncle's hospital bills come in stacks as thick as phone books. Before my shift, Kanoa caught me by the employee gate. He looked tired, older than the week before. You saw him, didn't you? Micah. I didn't answer. He lowered his voice. She doesn't take people fast. Not unless they're arrogant. She toys with them. Tests them. Once she notices you, the only safety's in the guidelines. Why me? I asked. Kanoa gave a sad smile. Because you followed them. She likes the ones who play the game. A normal night almost. From midnight to 2, it was quiet. Too quiet. The fluorescent hum pressed on my skull like pressure in an airplane cabin. I kept my patrol slow, deliberate. Every checkpoint, every locked door. I muttered the rules under my breath like a prayer. Don't acknowledge the cats. Don't look at the glass. Don't answer the intercom. Don't open the lounge. Don't speak to the child. The word steadied me. Almost. At 3:05, I heard it again. The giggle. It came from gate 9 this time. I turned my head and there she was, sitting cross-legged on the tile, braids draped over her shoulders. A black cat curled in her lap like a doll. She didn't move. Didn't beckon. Just watched. The rule said walk away without turning your back. But what if she didn't move either? How long could I keep retreating before I hit a wall? I tried the radio. Control. Gate 9. She's here again. Only static. Then, under the static, the sound of purring. The girl tilted her head. The cat in her lap yawned wide, showing teeth far too long. When I took a step back, I saw more movement in the corners. 4. 5. 6 pairs of eyes, low to the ground, glinting in the dark. They stayed just out of the light. Prowling. Circling. The girl lifted one finger. Not pointing at me, but drawing something in the air. A shape. A curve, then another. By the third stroke I realized she was tracing the outline of ears. Cat ears. My skin went cold. At 3:10, the intercom buzzed. Security to gate 9. Not the wrong voice this time. This was mine. My own voice, repeating over the speakers, calling myself to her. The girl's grin stretched wide. The cats began to advance, tails flicking, bodies rippling like they shared a single spine. I backed away faster, pulse hammering. I couldn't turn. Couldn't run. Just that slow, humiliating retreat. The child stood. The cats stopped in unison. She whispered, so faint I thought it was in my head. She wants to meet you. By the time I reached the windowed concourse, my legs were jelly. The clock read 3:14. 1 minute until I could safely look outside. I kept my eyes glued to the floor. Tap. 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 Claws on glass. I gritted my teeth. Counted backward from 10. From 9. From 8. Then the tapping stopped. A voice pressed right against my ear. Not from outside. Not from the intercom. From inside the glass itself. 10 is not enough. I looked up. And she was there. Not the child. Not the cats. Her. Tall as the window frame, ears sharp as blades, eyes burning gold. Her hand pressed to the glass, but the glass was bending inward, like it was made of water, ready to spill her through. The clock flipped to 3:15. And she smiled. I didn't tell Kanoa what I saw. How could I? The booklet said not to look at the glass before 3:15, and I'd looked. Yet she hadn't punished me. Not exactly. She just smiled, as though the rules were hers to change whenever she felt like it. That was worse than any claw, any whisper. Because it meant the rules weren't protection, they were permission. The shift begins. From the moment I swiped my badge, I felt her eyes. Not from one place, from everywhere. In the hum of the vending machine. In the flicker of the fluorescent tubes. In the low rumble of jets on the runway. Even the cats avoided me now. They slunk along the edges of the terminal, tails low, eyes wary. As if they knew she'd marked me. The girl at the gate. At 2:45, I saw her again. The child. This time she wasn't sitting. She was standing at the center of gate 12, hands folded in front of her dress, head tilted. A black cat sat at each heel, their eyes burning like coals. I whispered the rule to myself. Do not speak. Walk away. Don't turn your back. But before I could move, she spoke. You saw her, didn't you? Her voice was wrong, layered, like a cat's purr underneath a little girl's lilt. I froze. The rule didn't say what to do if she spoke first. I forced myself to take a step backward. Then another. The cats rose to their feet in perfect unison. Their tails lashed. You don't have to follow his rules, the girl whispered. She likes you better when you don't. My chest tightened. I wanted to run. But I remembered Micah. Remembered what happened when he broke the rules. So I kept moving. Slow. Never turning my back. Her eyes narrowed. The cats hissed. By 3:07, I reached the long wall of windows. My heart dropped. The glass wasn't just reflecting. It was rippling. Like something pushed against it from the other side. She was closer now. No longer blurred. Her face sharp and feline, cheekbones like blades, eyes like molten gold. Her lips moved without sound until the glass trembled and her voice spilled through like smoke. Come closer. I squeezed my eyes shut. Counted my steps. 4. 5. 6. When I opened them again, her hand was already inside, phasing through the glass as though it were mist. Black claws curling in the air, searching. The cats mewed low. The girl giggled. The clawed hand brushed the tip of my sleeve. My body locked. Every instinct screamed to bolt. But I remembered the rule. Don't run. Don't turn. I whispered it out loud, like a prayer. Her claw tugged the fabric, gentle, almost curious. Then, with a deliberate slowness, it retracted back into the glass. She smiled again. Not cruel. Not kind. Just hungry. By 3:16, the glass was solid again. The girl was gone. The cats scattered into shadow. But when I looked down at my sleeve, the fabric wasn't torn. It was marked. 3 perfect black lines, burned into the polyester, unburned into my skin beneath. I pressed a hand to my arm. My pulse hammered beneath the marks. And I understood. The rules weren't just keeping me alive. They were keeping me hers. I wore long sleeves to work the next night. Not because of the draft in the terminals, because I didn't want Kanoa to see the marks. 3 lines, black as ink, running from my bicep to my elbow. When I pressed them, they didn't hurt. They purred. At 2:30, my radio clicked alive. Static first. Then a voice. Unit 12, report. It wasn't Kanoa. It wasn't any supervisor I knew. The tone was smooth, flat, like someone reading from a script. Gate check complete, I lied. Static again. Then. Good. She's pleased with you. My stomach turned cold. I yanked the radio off my belt, thumbed it off, shoved it deep in my pocket. But even with the volume down, I swear I felt it vibrating against my leg. Like a purr. By 2:50, the cats were everywhere. Not walking across tiles like usual, no, this time I heard them in the walls. Scratching. Pacing. Dozens of claws against plaster. The ceiling panels above Gate 7 bulged like something crawled across the crawlspace. Dust sifted down, settling on my shoulders. I remembered Rule 1. Don't acknowledge the cats. So I kept walking. The scratching followed me. At 3:02, I reached the window hall. She was there again. Not Baudet the girl. Standing on the other side of the glass this time, braids pressed against the surface, hands flat like a passenger begging to be let in. Her lips moved. Soundless. I checked my watch. 3 minutes before I could safely look. But her eyes were locked on mine. And this time, I couldn't look away. Her mouth formed 3 words, slow, deliberate. She owns you. The intercom crackled. Security to Gate 10. I froze. The child was at Gate 10. The voice repeated it, louder. Security to Gate 10. Approach immediately. My booklet said, if the PA instructs you after 2 a.m., ignore it. Do not respond. But my legs wanted to move. The marks on my arm burned hot, like they were pulling me in her direction. At 3:07, the glass behind me groaned. I spun. I shouldn't have, but I did. She was there. Baudet. Half through the window. Shoulders first, sleek and black as obsidian, her head crowned with ears like knives. Her mouth curled around a purr that shook the floor. Don't be afraid. The child's voice echoed behind me, perfect mimicry. My chest locked. Every rule screamed in my head at once. Don't look. Don't speak. Don't run. Don't turn. Don't listen. But which one mattered now? Her clawed hand reached again. This time not curious. This time certain. She didn't touch me. She touched the marks. Traced them like a leash. And I swear I felt something inside me step forward. Not me. Something she wanted. At 3:15, the lights cut. When they came back, she was gone. So was the girl. But my arm was different. The marks had doubled 6 lines now, running past my elbow toward my wrist. And on the glass, where she had leaned through, a single word was etched deep into the pane. Soon. I woke before my shift to the sound of purring. Not in the room. In my chest. Like something had set up camp behind my ribs and was humming to itself. When I sat up, my arm itched so bad I clawed until skin came loose. The marks didn't fade. They weren't bruises anymore. They were raised, like scars. Like someone had branded me with 6 neat claws. Kanoa met me outside baggage claim. He looked worse than I felt. Hollow under the eyes, jaw tight like he hadn't slept in a month. Don't scratch at it, he muttered, eyes flicking to my arm under the sleeve. I froze. You know about it? He didn't answer. Just handed me a folded piece of paper. New rules. 2 of them. 1. Do not cover the marks after the 6th night. Let them breathe. 2. If she calls you by your full name, do not answer. No matter who you think is asking. Kanoa stuffed his hands in his jacket and walked off before I could say a word. 2:15, the cats weren't hiding in shadows anymore. They lined the corridor like statues, every set of eyes green, unblinking. When I passed, their heads turned in unison. None of them made a sound. Just watched. The silence felt heavier than the noise. At 2:40, I reached Gate 7. The window glass looked melted, warped in places like heat had bent it. My reflection was blurry. But the girl's wasn't. She stood sharp, clear, where my reflection should have been. You can't fight her, she whispered. My voice, my pitch, spoken through her mouth. The radio hissed again. Unit 12, the smooth voice said, calm as ever, she'll be gentle if you stop resisting. I yanked the radio out, slammed it against the floor. Plastic cracked. Battery slid across tiles. It still purred. At 2:57, the intercom came alive. Would my full name please report to gate 10? Hearing it out loud made my knees buckle. I hadn't heard my full name spoken in years. Nobody here knew it. The cats all turned toward gate 10 in perfect unison. The glass rattled. Something heavy pressed against it from outside. And then, from the glass, my reflection smiled. Not me. Her. She leaned closer, lips brushing the barrier. Answer me. I bolted. I don't remember running, just slamming through the service door, sprinting down a maintenance hall I'd never seen, heart stuttering against my ribs. When I stopped, the lights were dead. Just humming darkness. Behind me, dozens of claws scratched against the tiles, slow, deliberate. And the voice from the dark whispered my name again. Not angry. Not pleading. Certain. Like I already belonged to her. If the concourse was a stage, the maintenance tunnels were the spine underneath it, a place airport engineers call the beveled plane, concrete arteries, service chases, ducts, sump pumps. Nobody who's not paid to be there goes below. That's part of the operational security, locked access points, badge swipes labeled tech only, corridors so narrow 2 people can't pass without one stepping into a crawlspace. They sent me below because somebody had to check a faulty sensor at the far end of the east service loop, and I'd signed the supplemental maintenance watch form 3 weeks back. Kanoa handed me a paper badge with a magnet strip and a flashlight that made the world grainy at the edges. He didn't look me in the eye. Standard protocol, he said. Procedural. Measured. Follow the route. Check the sensors. Log everything. Keep your radio on low. Don't linger. Don't enter sealed rooms. No new rules. Same old guideline phrases. But there was something under his voice, like an instruction he'd been given and had to pass on, like a chain's weakest link doing its job. I swiped the service door. The magnet read, access granted. The corridor breathed a blown air hum. The smell down here was always mechanical coolant and ozone and the faintest hint of jet fuel. Tonight, something else rode the air, warm fur, a sweetness like warm milk. Procedural language steadied me at first. Checkpoints, 0001 Junction A, 0002 Valve 14, 0003 Sensor Array 3F. I logged each reading in the maintenance console with the same terse language I'd used to describe broken luggage belts and sticky card readers. The numbers were real. The duty roster, the time stamps, all true and boring and ordinary. That's what anchors you when the rest of the world starts to float. Then the tunnel narrowed and the ceiling dropped to a height that made my shoulders ache. Fluorescent tubes down here hummed on a different frequency, a slow strobe that caught brief, impossible reflections along the concrete. Out of the corner of my eye something moved, a cat slipping between conduits, tail high like a flag. I did the counting without thinking, 10, 9, 8. Procedural counting. Rule 1, obeyed. The cat stopped, sat, and looked at me. Its eyes were not green or yellow. They reflected like polished brass. I kept my head down. I logged sensor 3F, normal variance. That made me feel competent. Competence is a small shield. At junction G7, the tunnel opened into a maintenance alcove that I'd never seen on any map. The badge reader read restricted in a scrolling amber. There were no ductworks here. Instead, the concrete walls were old, pitted, and inset with stones, black basalt somebody had mortared into the structure in a patchy, hand-laid pattern. In the overhead light the basalt looked like an old reef, in the angle of my flashlight it threw shadows like teeth. On a low shelf sat a notebook. Leather, cracked. Not airport issued, not municipal. It had the shaky handwriting of someone who'd written late at night, in the margins, with grease on their fingers. I picked it up because that was the job: collect anomalies. Document. Transfer to control. The first page was a name, Micah Scratchy, then crossed out. The entries that followed were a mess of workplace shorthand and something else, a different kind of notation that read like ritual, columns of times and actions annotated with small doodles of ears and whiskers. September 11th 0235 counted 10. She pressed. Gate 12 window. Jerky. Claw left. I took it. / response, 000. Note, jerky did not consume. 09/120310 Child's laugh at G10. Didn't call control. I did. Mistake. The air tasted like pennies. Later, a line in block capitals that stopped me cold: she is an old household god. She likes clean things. Do not make mess. There were references to an island site I knew, not printed in the airport history binders, but the way older stewards talked about it in half-closed eyes: a low mound on the western shore, Kapu once, quarried basalt moved for foundations, bones underneath. The notebook called it the crossing. The neatness of the script turned into frantic shorthand and then into a final entry, 2 words, repeated. Do not answer. In the margins, scrawled like a man listening to his own teeth, Micah wrote, she's not from here. She found a house and liked it. She brought friends. She wants a collar. She doesn't ask, she takes. There was care in the way he noted times like operational parameters. There was terror in the looped handwriting that betrayed his failing grip on either reality or him. I should have turned that notebook in immediately. The rational, procedural part of my brain ticked those boxes: evidence collected. Reported on channel, maintenance, 1. Secure storage at lockbox 3. Chains of custody. But something thinned in my chest when I tried to stand, a tug like a leash on ligature memory. My marks burned. The brand lines along my arm stung as though they registered proximity to basalt. I tucked the notebook under my jacket and kept moving. Rule compliance is procedural 2, document, report, follow the chain. I rationalized that keeping the notebook meant I could study it on break, cross-reference notes, find patterns. That was the voice of someone who learns by work. The tunnel opened onto a cavernous service bay I'd never been in before. It smelled not of coolant but of dust and old incense, sandalwood, myrrh, things I'd once only seen in theater props. The bare bulbs cast a honeyed light. And there, in the middle of the bay, was a circle of cat children. Not full cats. Not quite human. Their shoulders were too narrow for human torsos. Their legs folded wrong, taut with an animalic tension. Each had a face that wanted to be childlike, cheeks, braids, a laugh frozen on its lips, but the mouth was wrong in the way Micah had described, too full of needle teeth. They sat in a ring, legs crossed, hands in their laps, staring at me with the patience of predators. I remembered a rule and how it had been written with that same sterile, imperative voice: if you encounter an unattended child in the concourse, do not speak. Notify control, then walk away without turning your back. The maintenance bay was not the concourse. This was behind the airport. That made it worse. The normal channels for safety seemed thinner down here. One of the child figures lifted a hand and beckoned with a slow, practiced motion. I did not speak. I did not call control. I did not move out of the line of sight that let me keep the exit in my peripheral vision. My legs acted like machinery. Step. Log entry. Breath. Do not approach, I said aloud, then dosed the sentence in the language of procedure: do not engage. They smiled, all of them, the same grin mirrored like coins. One of the cat children let out a sound. It was less a laugh than a calibration, a purr run through a human throat, then clicks and a hiss. In the corner, where a service elevator rumbled on its cable, the basalt mortared into the wall seemed to breathe. Small flakes of dust fell and formed a powdering of black snow on the concrete. A voice came from somewhere deeper in the bay. Not through a PA. It was the quiet, surefire voice of Kanoa, or someone who'd learned to sound like him. You shouldn't be here at all. He stepped out of a shadowed archway I hadn't seen. In the light he looked like the guy who hired me, the old fisherman with salt in his hair. His uniform was dirty, sleeves rolled, hands stained with something that could have been grease or something much older. He watched me with the sort of sympathy that's 2 parts regret, 1 part calculation. You took something that doesn't belong to your pocket, he said. He didn't ask. He stated it as a bullet point. Give it back. My hand went to the notebook. My fingers trembled between reporting procedure and the raw instinct to hold the only clue I had to what was happening. He came closer and in that measured voice used the technical term no one in the concourse had used. This is containment architecture, not storage. Those stones are stabilizers. Their placement is a remedial retrofit. They hold a boundary. You removing logs, anonymous badges, or notebooks changes the chain. Chains matter. Procedural language. It made him seem less like a man and more like a functionary of the system the airport had become, a living rule giver with a human face. Will you give it back? He asked softly. I didn't. I shook my head, a raw, manual rejection. Micah's notes, I said. They're evidence. I tried to keep my voice steady. Evidence. Chain of custody. Custodial control. These are working-class words. They anchor the brain when myth washes over it. Kanoa's face slackened. For a second he looked like a man who'd been given a choice by a child and had only grief to show for it. You think evidence helps? He laughed, low and maladjusted. That's the sort of thing rookies think. Evidence is how we remember. Memory is how she finds you. Behind him the cat children had turned away from me and now watched Kanoa with the same placid interest. One of them crawled toward him and melted into the shadow at his boot like ink into water. Kanoa sighed and reached out. Without touching me, he brushed the notebook with the pad of his thumb. The leather warmed under his skin like a living thing. He closed his fingers and when he opened them the notebook lay on the shelf, shifted 2 inches closer to the basalt wall. You don't get to choose the chain, he said. You only get to follow it. He walked to the far arch and left me there with the kids, the smell of sandalwood thick in the breath of the bay. The tunnel hummed with small mechanical noises that could have been rats or the articulation of dozens of paws in the walls. My radio on my belt begged for channel life. For a moment I thought about switching it on and calling control with the clipboard perfect tone, incident, unauthorized entity, requesting support. But the notebook's weight in my chest felt heavier now than when I had it. I thought of rules, do not answer intercom calls after 2:45. I thought of the counting backward, my throat working like a machine. I thought of the marks on my arm, how they become furrows and then raised scars. Something in me wanted to test the system to push the procedural language to its limits and see which part of it held. That voice was not rational. It was curiosity, the human trait that asks whether a thing is a superstition or a system. The system responds by showing you the difference. On my way out I looked once at the basalt. In the stone's face someone, not my eyes, someone who watched without lids, had carved a symbol, a seated cat, ears pricked, tail curled around an ankh. Not Hawaiian symbology. Egyptian, almost, a household guardian placed in a foreign house. A god imported into a building and given a foundation like a houseplant wired into the HVAC. I remembered Micah's scrap, she's not from here. She found a house and liked it. She brought friends. She wants a collar. The marks on my arm itched unbearably as I climbed back to the concourse. When the service door swung shut behind me it let out a sigh like a mouth closing. I logged the exit procedure as required, 0012 exit secured, notebook, recovered to hand, anomalies, none. The screen accepted the entry with the sterile green pulse of a system that did not want to be bothered by myth. Outside, under the sodium glare of the service yard, one of the stray cats watched me from atop a generator like a sentinel. When I lifted my hand, just an automatic half-wave, it tilted its head and, briefly, I thought I saw in its eyes the same golden light that had lived in the girl and in the woman at the glass. By the time my shift ended, the marks had crawled halfway down my forearm, like a ladder I didn't want to climb. The notebook sat in my locker. I should have turned it in. I should have followed the chain. Instead I locked the door, slid the chain, and sat down on the bench in the empty concourse and read. Procedural entries, midnight notations, later entries smeared with something darker. The last page was not Micah's. It was someone older. The handwriting was neat, careful. It read. She came with the first traders. They called her Batet in old houses, a keeper of thresholds. In strange places, she learns new measures. She keeps a household but takes the collars she needs. The treaty is survival. The treaty is labor. We keep the rules so she keeps us. But rules rust when men forget why they follow them. It was dated more than 20 years ago. I closed the notebook. My fingers trembled and I felt both very tired and dread keen, like a night watchman who'd just been told which graves had keys under their stones. On the concourse speakers, distant and impossible, the PA came alive with my voice again, not a recording but me, saying my name as if someone was reading it from a roster. The sound was soft, intimate, and not the same as the control voice. It ended with a purr. I put my head in my hands and counted backwards. 10. 9. 8. When I got to 3, something cold brushed the back of my neck and the lights went out. The marks kept moving. Not literally, no one reading this wants metaphors that forget to breathe, but the lines on my arm changed like old scars do. They spread, the skin puckering around them in little ridges that felt almost like whiskers if you traced them with your thumb. Sometimes at night they would throb in time with the airport generators, sometimes they hummed when I stood too close to the basalt patch in the service bay. Whatever she branded into me was learning the wiring of the place. I tried to treat it like a maintenance problem. That's the only thing that kept me from collapsing. When your life has been built from shifts and pay stubs and the language of logs and timestamps, you default to troubleshooting. Document, marks present. Location, left forearm. Symptom, purring sensation. Remedy attempted, cover with sleeve, avoided. Result, no improvement. That morning before my shift, because survival is a full-time Joby called my sister. Her name is Lonnie. She's got a kid, and 2 part-time gigs, and more good sense than a lot of people I've known. I was careful at first. "Hey, how's Auntie?" I asked. She told me. I told her I was working nights. $34.50, can you believe it? I tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. When I said I wanted to come home for a few days, she hesitated. "You look tired," she said finally. "You sound far." Then she checked the calendar, voice softening. Her schedule went tight. "We'll talk this weekend," she said, and the line clicked. It should have been reassurance. If anything, it made me feel smaller. I had thought about driving back to Wahiawa, sleeping in my sister's living room anywhere but here. But you don't walk away from the thing once it knows your smell. Kanoa had said that. The notebook had said it indirectly. The marks had said it by burning when I thought about leaving. A good guard keeps 2 things constant, radio contact and patrol timing. The rules don't care about your family. They care about orbit, they care about rhythm. So I kept my rhythm. That night the concourse smelled of new carpet and leftover airplane coffee. The cats were more numerous, every reflection in the stainless steel railings harboring a pair of amber eyes. The child didn't appear at her usual gates. She moved like a rumor, showing up where you'd looked last. That's the way she worked bait and return. At 2:40 my radio began to chatter in the low way it had learned to, not commands but nudges. Static first, then a voice that sounded like a supervisor reading a checklist. Unit 12, confirm. Gate checks all secure. I answered on habit. All secure, Gate 7 reporting. The voice cut me off. A different tone slid into the channel, the one I'd heard before that wasn't Kanoa but used to sound official. It said, blunt and soft, stay on your path. I wanted to ask who it was. The guidebook on my mind said ignore unknown calls. So I logged the check and kept moving. At 2:53, while passing the long windows, the PA flared my own voice over the concourse again. Unit 12, report to Gate 10, it purred in the cadence of somebody reading names from a roster. My mouth tasted like copper. A test. That's what it felt like. She was learning the beats that kept me from the edge of the glass. She was practicing where to call. There is a particular terror to being predictable in the face of something that wants to play you like a metronome. When the intercom said my name a second time, the gallery of cats around the ceiling vents descended in a low, coordinated ripple. Their feet were light, not clumsy soundless. They positioned themselves so that every exit in the corridor had a watcher. It's practical, it's also ritual. The child showed up in the reflection of the glass before I saw her in the flesh. Her face was pale as a flight manifest, her braids looked like cords. She mouthed the word leave and made a sliding motion across the tiles with her hand, like trimming the edge of a garment. I didn't move. My training, the one you earn by staying alive, told me to keep the rhythm. Count backwards. Do not answer the PA. Do not speak to the child. Walk away without turning your back. So I walked. Slow, mechanical, the counting in my head a dull clock. 10:98. At 3:04, I hit the service stairwell and took it 2 at a time because the maintenance reading would be due. Halfway down the metallic corridor the radio in my pocket went dead. Not static dead. The screen black. The red indicator for battery glowed like an ulcer. I shook it. Nothing. I tried the backup on the belt. Dead. The frequency that used to hum with the voices of control and station techs and the sound of somewhere to appeal to was a flat silence. I felt like a man who'd been cut off from the language of the only world he trusted. Control. I said aloud, though no one answered. That's when I noticed the signs nailed to the doorframes. Small, adhesive tags someone had printed and stapled up, cheap laminate, emergency, radio blackout procedure. The instructions read in neat, airport memo font, when radio is down, report to nearest supervisory post. Do not unsheath cell phones. Do not attempt external calls. Move to standard patrol route 03 until restored. The nearest supervisory post was Kanoa's lounge. It was a long walk. I crossed the concourse, counting with a steady, mechanic cadence so I didn't slip into thinking. Every gate I passed seemed longer than the last. The cats watched me from bench crevices like tide pool creatures waiting for low water. I kept the route, like someone walking in a trench. When I reached Gate 10, the child stood in the middle of the tile as if she had always been there, like an installed sculpture the airport had paid to display. She smiled up at me, teeth not quite human. Her braid tipped, and the black cat at her feet rose and rubbed against the cuff of my pant just a brush, an intimacy that made the hairs on my neck stand up. You can't leave, she said, and for the first time she used the airport's language, protocol. She said it with the clipped, procedural sound of an announcement. You signed a supplemental form. You pledged to keep the hours. I thought about the paperwork. I thought about the union posting and the way my name had been typed into a spreadsheet. I thought about how 1,000 small administrative acts can create a lattice that traps you just as surely as a chain. It was the most banal thing she could say, and it landed like a blow. She stepped aside and gestured toward the concourse doors. For a second I imagined the sunlight waiting beyond them, Hawaii bright and indifferent. I imagined calling Lonnie from the parking lot, telling her to pick me up. I imagined ripping off my badge and throwing it in the trash. Then every stray cat in the concourse tilted its head at once and emitted a low sound that I could almost map to harmonics. It vibrated the fillings in my teeth. At the far end of the concourse, Kanoa stood under the exit sign, hands folded. When I approached, he didn't look relieved to see me. He did not look like a man who'd rescued anyone. He looked like a man waiting for a tally. "You heard the broadcast," he said. "No question." "I heard it," I answered. "You followed procedure?" he asked. "Yes." The answer came out too fast. There was a weight in my chest, an urgency to report the blackout. There was also a smaller, more dangerous voice whispering, "If you report, she knows you tried to leave. If you don't, she thinks you consent." Kanoa's face was pinched with something like pity. "Good," he said finally. "Keep your path." I wanted to tell him about the notebook, about the basalt, about the way the child had said protocol, the way the cats had pressed against my ankles. I wanted him to help me. But I had watched him in the maintenance bay. I knew he was not a man who would break the chain. He was the chain's keeper. When the lights overhead tripped and the concourse pitched into a hush that felt too complete, the child's voice slid into my ear as if she was sitting on the shoulder of the hollow between the terminal and the tarmac. "You're noisier than the others," she said. "You read too much." It's a funny humiliation, to be reproached for curiosity by a child who's not a child. It cut a hollow in me that resembled a technical failure, a short circuit where my reason and my fear met. "Why do I have to stay?" I asked, though the rules had said never to speak. "You made a pledge," she answered. She smiled, and for a flake of a second I saw the woman at the glass instead of the child. It was like her face flashed through a projector, no beginning or end, only frames. "You keep watch. That's what keepers do. You keep so everyone else can leave at dawn. That's the trade. The trade. Rules as labor." She spoke like a union rep with claws. The notion that our shifts were tribute transformed my work into a levy. I felt something crawl beneath my skin then, a small motion like teeth testing fabric. The marks itched and flared, and for a moment I thought I might scream. But the sound died. No one would believe the scream that breaks a rule. At the far end of the concourse, beyond the last gate and past the runway glass, a figure moved thin and purposeful, the silhouette of someone in an airline vest. For a second I thought it was an actual traveler. Then I saw it was a maintenance cart with a ragged piece of cloth draped over it. It moved against the grain of the airflow, as if someone outside had pushed it from the tarmac. The child laughed. "She's making the rounds," she said, delighted. "Listen to them purr." Kanoa put a hand on my shoulder. "Not a comfort. A marking." "You did the right thing," he said, then added, in a voice that was less like instruction and more like a ledger entry, "Keep reporting. Keep counting." I left the concourse before dawn like a man carrying evidence. The radio in my pocket blinked when I walked into the service yard, the battery icon a weak green. When I put my ear to it, the channel was alive with 100 static-laced voices giving roll call. For a second I almost told someone about the notebook. About the basalt. But who would take a notebook from a man with a set of clawed lines burned into his arm and believe it? Who would risk looking? On my night break I sat in my car in the lot and stared at my hands. The marks were cleaner in the sodium light, the ridges sharper. I peeled back my sleeve and pressed my thumb along the longest of them. It pulsed in answer, like a live wire. I called Lonnie again. The signal was thin. "Hey," she answered. "You okay?" I lied. "Yeah," I said. "Long nights. You know." She didn't press. "Come home if you need to," she said finally. "I'll figure it out." "I can't," I said, and the word tasted like iron. Then I hung up. I sat in the car until the sky bled into a stubborn, early blue. By the time I stepped back into the terminal to clock out, the concourse felt different, less a job site and more an altar in which I was a newly appointed votary. A supervisor I didn't know, an older woman with airline insignia, met me at the badge reader and asked if I'd logged the night's anomalies. I did, in the agonizingly precise language of a maintenance worker. Sensor normal. Radio interruption. Cat activity observed. Child sighting, gate 10-304. No physical injuries. No property loss. The screen accepted my report and printed a receipt I tucked into my pocket. It was bureaucratic comfort, a timestamp, a paper trail. On the walk home I found the notebook in my locker. It wasn't there when I went to work, it was there when I left. Like someone had returned it while I wasn't looking. The pages inside were updated, not in my handwriting, not Micah's. The neat script had been added to at the margin with short entries that read like inventory, marks, increase. Radio, patchy. Control, compromised. A final line, written bold and certain, subject responds to threat. Engage softly. I put the notebook back and closed the locker with fingers that trembled, and for a second, just a secondi, thought about pulling my badge off and throwing it like a coin into a pulsing sea. The thought made the marks itch like angry cat teeth. I did not leave. I drove home and watched the sunrise over the Poly and felt like a man who'd been marked by a tide that can't be turned. I ate cold rice from the gas station and pretended it was dinner. I thought about my uncle's hospital bills. I thought about Lonnie's voice. The notebook's last line echoed in my head like a new rule: she learns through your routines. Change them slowly. Do not panic the household god. At noon, my phone lost signal. Not the kind of signal you get when you're in a tunnel. The kind where the bars die like breath on a window. Texts went out as half-sent things, and the reply bubbles never came. When the bars came back 2 hours later, there was a single message from a number I didn't recognize: "You are a good keeper." I stared at it until the screen dimmed and the message faded into unread light. I wanted to delete it. I wanted to show it to someone. I wanted to throw something at the basalt until the black stone cracked. Instead I sat down and counted. 10. 9. 8. By the time I reached 1, the lights in my apartment dimmed once, like eyelids closing, and the cat under my porch, always astray, always unremarkable, let out a purr too loud for such a small animal. If you're reading this, if you ever find a posting for night security at an airport built on old stone, listen to what I'm about to say, because I wish someone had told me in straight words before I had to learn them with my skin. Bring a notebook and write everything. Timestamps, sounds, sightings. It will keep you rational. It will also mark you. Do not call attention to the things that follow the rules. They are practitioners. They notice disruptions. Keep your patrol times exact. If you can change shifts, do it in small increments. Abrupt changes are noticed. Don't go below unless you have to. The basalt there is not construction waste. It is a patch on a seam. These are practical things, not prayers. They may not save you. They might only delay the time until she decides you make a tidy collar. When I locked my apartment door that night, the marks on my arm seared with a new heat, and in the hallway a small cat sat in the pool of my porch light, tail wrapped like a question. It looked up at me with the steady, indifferent patience of a creature that knows what was owed. I should have left. I did not. At 2:58 the radio in my pocket blinked to life for a single second, and a voice-me voice, or someone's who sounded exactly like mine, said, clear as prayer and cold as glass, "Keeper, it's time." Then the line went dead. They don't warn you like the movies do. There's no thunderclap or rolling organ chord. For me it began like the slow blue of a phone screen calling itself awake in the dark, a single bright blink on the radio, a voice that belonged to me answering itself, and then the world folding in on one instruction. "Keeper, it's time." I sat up so fast the lamp hit the wall. The marks on my arm flared so bright I thought my skin would smoke. They felt hot and patient, like a stove that remembers your favorite pan. For a second less than a secondi thought about running. I thought about Lonnie's living room and the way her kid still calls my name when they're learning words. I thought about my uncle and his charted pills and the stack of hospital envelopes on my kitchen table. Then I remembered the notebook, the basalt, the maintenance alcove, and Kanoa's thin, tired eyes. Being a keeper is mostly paperwork until it isn't. I dressed without thinking, long sleeves, badge tucked under my shirt, flashlight in the pocket I always used for pens. I ate nothing. I climbed into my car and drove to the airport like a man guided by blinking lights and habit. The night was humid, trade wind ghosts sat on the roof of the Honda. Somewhere a dog howled. I kept my hands steady on the wheel and counted between the stoplights. 10. 9. 8. On the concourse the cats were waiting as if they'd set the chairs and arranged the schedule. They sat like jury members across the benches, tails curled just so, eyes like little lamps. They watched me move and watched the rhythm of me. When I passed, one jumped onto the rail and rubbed its cheek against my knee. It was an intimate thing. A bribe. A note in the ledger that said, "You belong." Kanoa met me at the employee gate. His uniform looked like it had been ironed the way people iron things before funerals, with intent and flatness. He didn't offer the booklet again. I think he'd learned already that giving it out made the rules a contract, and contracts need witnesses. He nodded once, then looked past me to the concourse. "She's been calling," he said. It wasn't a question. 2 nights now. "You answered once." "It was the radio," I said. "Procedural. I was training myself to talk like a log. Hardware failure. Signal interference. Agent error." He gave a sad, weary kind of laugh that was not a laugh. "You answered with your body," he said. "We all make mistakes. Some are easier to fix than others." We took the maintenance stairwell down 2 levels to a locked door I'd never seen before. Swipe, access granted. The door opened with a long, mechanical exhale. The light inside smelled like sandalwood and old paper. The air was warmer than the service tunnels, humid like a living place rather than a system. Behind the door, the alcove stretched wider than memory allowed. The basalt wall dominated the room, its stones darker and tighter, as if someone had set them there yesterday by hand. Before the wall was a low platform and on the platform a collar. Not a real collar. Not leather and steel. Something like braided rope, black as volcanic sand, and at its center a pendant that looked like a cat's eye set into glass. When I breathed near it, I heard the faintest tick, like a small clock wound down and being kept alive. Kanoa stood to the side, hands folded like a banker preparing a ledger. Around the room, the cat children sat in their ring as they'd done the night I found them under the bay. Their heads rotated in a slow synchrony, watching, cataloging, noting. "You don't have to," Kanoa said, though he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the collar. Maybe he was seeing the ledger of employees who'd worn it and how their pens had stopped moving on their sheets. "Do what?" I asked. The question came out thin. "This is a transfer." He spoke in the clipped language of procedure and the heavy vowels of a man making confession. "She needs a keeper. She selected you because you kept the hours and because you asked questions." I thought of Micah and the claw and the way his handwriting had unraveled like frayed rope. I thought of the notebook and how it had been put back while I wasn't watching. I thought of the way the concourse hummed when the cats walked and the way the child's smile opened into the long teeth. "And if I refuse?" Kanoa's face was a map of lines. "Refusal is a variable," he said. "It changes schedules. It makes the household restless. The treaty doesn't like variables." "Then there's no treaty," I heard myself say, my voice a throttle. "Practical words. There's coercion. There's labor extraction." He nodded like someone noting a discrepancy. "Names for the same things differ by tribe. Call it what you will. The point, she takes collars. We keep the rules so collars don't choke us. The collar keeps the household tidy. He stepped forward and laid the rope collar on my palm. It was lighter than it looked. The glass eye pendant stared up at me like a pupil that knew a secret. The marks on my arm burned hotter as if the rope called to them, like iron to magnet. You can wear it for a night, Kanoa said. See how it feels. If you can't, if your hands shake or your voice change, we can revisit the roster. His voice softened to near silence. But it's her choosing. Choosing. I tasted the word and it tasted like ledger ink. You choose who signs. He shrugged in the way of someone who'd accepted his role. He kept the chain intact. We rotate the collars. Sometimes they take, sometimes they don't. Most of the time we trade. Sometimes they prefer the quiet ones. Sometimes the curious ones. Sometimes the ones who fumble with the rules. Behind him, the child figures hummed. It wasn't human sound. It was like the vibration in the foundation when a heavy plane taxied by. Their little hands clapped softly, a ritual like a timekeeper's metronome. I lifted the collar to my throat. My fingers trembled. The glass eye blinked in a way I could not explain, and for a second I thought I saw my own reflection inside it, worn, startled, older. I thought of all the little compromises I'd already made, the nights, the silence, the counting, the way I had stopped calling home. Compromise is a slow work. It doesn't feel like loss until you step into the field and the crops are gone. You put it on, Kanoa said. He waited like a man watching a lock click. You do one pass through the concourse wearing it. You log your time. If after the pass you're unwell, you bring it back. If you're fine, you keep it for a week. You keep it for a week, I corrected, because language still mattered to me. Not you. It was a small difference. A workman's pedantry. A lifeline. He smiled a thin smile as if to say he'd known I'd grasp that. Yes. I set the collar to my neck. It was cool, like river rock. When the strand settled, the marks along my arm flared like a recognition signal. Something in the alcove hummed deeper, approving. The cats made a sound that made my teeth ache with memory. Don't sleep in it, Kanoa warned. Do not answer when she calls by your name. Keep the radio on but low. And if the child speaks through you, do not comply. The last instruction he delivered almost like a boxed item in a checklist, like an emergency protocol pasted into a binder. You will feel a settling. That's normal. I thought of all the lines in my hand that felt like the braid of a rope. Why collars? I asked, trying to stitch sense where there was myth. Why not something else? The household god likes a tidy house, Kanoa said, and the answer was a worker's answer, reductive, practical, and full of sorrow. She organizes what she keeps. Collars are tidy. He helped me up. The cats lifted as one and stood in line to escort me. People would call it a parade. I called it a procession. My steps were small. I kept my shoulders square. As I walked the concourse, something happened that made my throat close. The intercom, usually dead at that hour, came alive with my voice giving a standard radio check. I heard myself sound professional, bored, competent. The collar sat at my throat like a weight and a hinge. People listening would have heard nothing wrong. At gate 10 a little girl sat on a bench that had been empty the night before. She watched me with a gaze so steady and so small it made me feel exposed. Her braid brushed her knee. The black cat that had been at her feet hopped up and rubbed its face against the collar. A shock like static licked my skin where the glass eye pendant lay against my windpipe. For a moment, something else spoke in me. Not my memory. Not my voice. It was not full words so much as the sense of archive, lists of timesheets, inventory, the rhythm of check-ins, the logic of keeping. I felt a competence that was not mine, knowledge of door codes I never knew, the propensity of certain gates to flicker when certain conditions met, the comforting minutiae of safety checks. It was like being enabled with technical know-how, but the cost felt like a hand sliding into mine and taking purchase. The girl looked up. Her mouth opened, and for the first time I heard Bastet, not the woman, not the child, not the cats, but the old, muscle-deep sound of a purr that rolled like machinery. It was not spoken. It was broadcast: keep the house tidy. I thought of my uncle's bills. I thought of Lonnie's offer. I thought of leaving the collar on like a bad watch. I thought of Micah's handwriting unwinding. There is a moment in every job where you discover you are not the only thing keeping the place alive. If you are lucky, it is a moment that keeps you safe. If you are unlucky, it is the moment you become part of the mechanism. I walked on. The cats followed. The child's smile split and folded into the shape of a contract. At the far end of the concourse, Kanoa waited like a sentinel who'd also been in the ring. He inclined his head. "You did well," he said. "Now log the pass." My hand found the radio. My voice reported as if from the inside of a schematic: "Gate checks clear. Sensors nominal. Collar status, secure." The words were true and false at once. And beneath them, in the stone-slow language of something older, a new line threaded through my bones. When I finished the pass and sat at the guard station to sign the log, the notebook that had been in my locker was open on the table. The handwriting inside had updated again. In bold stroke someone had written, "New keeper, active." Below that, a smaller note: Simeon's private, hurried scrawl read, "He answers the clock. He keeps tidy. Rotate in 7 days." I pressed my hand to my arm and felt the marks hum like a satisfied engine. They were part of me now. They thrummed with the pattern of shift work: check, note, count, repeat. They were not theft. They were labor. Later, in the early gray when cleaning crews came in with their carts and the airport exhaled into daylight, the child stood at the last gate and waved an ordinary, innocent hand. She looked smaller when the light changed. The cats melted into the shadow lines. Kanoa's hand landed on my shoulder, brief, no warmth. He said, without ceremony, "You'll learn. We teach new keepers how to tidy the house." I wanted to ask him whether keepers ever left. I wanted to ask whether collars came off. I wanted to ask what else the treaty had in the fine print. But his eyes were already elsewhere, on the little motions of his clipboard. I signed the log, the letters blunt and careful. The collar at my throat felt like a strap that had always been there. I drove home with the radio silent and the marks warm under my shirt. I pulled into the lot and for the first time thought about the alternative, not the mythic heroics of confronting a goddess, but the paperwork of quitting. Who did you send the resignation to? Where did you file a notice that you wouldn't be coming back to a job that also happened to be a sanctum? The notebook in my locker waited for me when I returned that night. A new page had been added. It said, in the neatest hand I'd seen in that book, one line. "Keeper, do not answer by name. Keep count. Keep the house tidy." Beneath it, someone had drawn a little cat with a collar around its neck and shaded the eyes so it shone. I put the notebook back in the pocket of my jacket and went to bed with the collar loose at my throat just in case. My hands trembled as they always did before sleep, and the marks were the steady metronome. Around midnight I dreamt of ledger sheets stacked like tiles. In the dream I signed my name 1,000 times and every signature looked like the same handwriting. At 2:58 the radio blinked, then went quiet. The world kept its clock. The cats kept their vigil. And the household kept its house. The collar doesn't weigh much. That's the lie. On the concourse it feels like nothing, like braided string. But the longer I wear it, the more I know it's heavier than it should be. Like gravity's playing favorites. Day 1 after the pass, I noticed 2 things. 1, I never checked my watch. I didn't have to. The times came to me before I looked. 2:15, 2:40. 2:58, my bones hummed with it. 2, my penmanship changed. Neater. Precise. Not mine. Kanoa left me a single sticky note on the break room fridge. Keep the house tidy. Don't let them see your hand shake. That was it. No greeting. No instructions about lunch breaks. Nothing about the collar. Just that reminder. He didn't need to say more. Because I was starting to understand, the notebook, the patrols, the rules, they weren't written to warn us. They were written to organize us. We weren't protecting the airport from Batet. We were protecting Bastet's household from chaos. And now I was on the housekeeping staff. They aren't hiding anymore. Not even from daylight. I walked the outer corridor around 3:15 a.m., and 3 of them strolled right past the TSA checkpoint like they owned it. The officers didn't see. They didn't hear the claws on tile. They didn't smell the musk of fur. But I did. And I swear the collar tightened when I stopped to watch. The smallest cat brushed my leg and looked up. For one breath, its pupils were human. Green. Just like the child's. The notebook in my locker, the one that shouldn't be mine, has started updating faster. When I leave it shut, it writes anyway. Whole sections fill in by morning. This week's pages. Keeper active, shift logged. Gate 7, minor irregularity. House settled. New keeper handwriting stabilized. The last line was underlined twice. 2:58 again. I knew it was coming before the radio even crackled. Keeper. A woman's voice, not the girl's. Not Kanoa's. Lower, steadier. Keeper, the floor is not clean. I looked down. The tiles under gate 12 shimmered faintly. Not dirt. Not dust. Something wet. Black. It moved when I stepped toward it, retreating into the cracks between tiles. Like shadow with claws. I didn't touch it. Didn't report it. Just noted it in the log. 2:58, floor not clean. House unsettled. The collar pulsed warm against my throat. Off shift, my phone buzzed. Lonnie again. You're scaring me, she said. Your voice, it doesn't sound like you. I didn't answer right away. Because she was right. My cadence was off. My syllables landed like check marks. She asked me to come by, said the kid wanted to see me. Said it would help me remember who I was. I promised I would. But when I checked the time, it was already 1:50 a.m. And the cats don't like when I'm late. I write this now in the break room, collar loose but not off. My handwriting is sharp, uniform. Not mine. Somewhere beyond the glass, a child is laughing. And in the corner of the page, a new line appeared inked in before my eyes while I was still holding the pen. Keeper, do not confide in family. House must stay tidy. The first time Lonnie came by the airport, I almost didn't recognize her. It wasn't her hair pulled back or the way she looked older in the light of the drop-off lane. It was that she looked at me too long, like she wasn't sure she was talking to the right man. You don't answer your phone anymore, she said. Her kid was asleep in the car seat behind her, head lolling to the side. So I thought I'd try this. 10 minutes. That's all. I should have said no. The rules don't say anything about family visits, but the log in my locker had been filling itself with warnings lately, and I had a bad feeling the next one would spell her name. Instead, I nodded and followed her into the concourse. The airport at night is a different animal than the airport by day. It smells like bleach and machine oil instead of sunscreen and coffee. The lights buzz louder. The echoes don't stop when they should. Lonnie noticed. She pulled her jacket tighter and glanced at the empty gates. Feels wrong, she whispered. Her kid stirred in her arms. Eyes half open, but not awake. He mumbled something into her shoulder. A sound like a cat's purr. I froze. Did you hear that? I asked. She frowned. He's just dreaming. But the collar at my throat warmed, as if the sound had been meant for me. At gate 7, the girl was waiting. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the carpet, as if she'd been dropped there. She smiled, wide, teeth too sharp for her face. Lonnie didn't see her. She walked right through the girl's shadow, humming to keep the baby calm. The girl tilted her head and locked eyes with me. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then the baby laughed in perfect sync. The radio crackled. "Keeper," the smooth voice said. "Family in the concourse unsettles the house. Remove them." I grabbed Lonnie's arm before I realized what I was doing. My grip was too tight. She flinched. "You need to go," I said. "Right now." Her eyes searched mine. "What's happening to you?" Behind her, the child stood up. She was taller than before. Older. Maybe 12 now, not 8. Her braids longer, her smile stretched thinner. She whispered one word, and the sound came from my nephew's mouth instead of hers. "Keeper." I shoved Lonnie toward the exit. "Go." She went, pale and trembling, clutching her son so tight he whimpered. When the automatic doors hissed shut behind her, the concourse sighed in relief. The collar loosened. The cat stepped back into shadow. But the logbook had already updated. Violation recorded, family entered concourse. House unsettled. Keeper fault. At the bottom of the page, in neat, unfamiliar script, another note appeared. Next time, the collar will tighten. The collar doesn't choke like human hands do. It doesn't grab or squeeze. It shrinks. The metal closes in on itself, one imperceptible click at a time, until your pulse flutters against it like a trapped bird. You can breathe, but every breath feels borrowed. That's how I woke up after sending Lonnie away. The leather of the couch in the break room was damp under me, though I couldn't remember sweating. The radio sat beside my head, switched off but humming anyway. The logbook was open on the floor, a fresh entry scrawled across both pages. "The house is patient, keeper. You will not be." I tore it out. Burned it in the wastebasket. Didn't matter. When I opened the book again, the words were still there, etched deeper, like a scar. "You've done it now," Kanoa muttered when I finally stumbled into his office. He didn't look up from the manifest he was pretending to check. His hair was uncombed, eyes red. He had the same collar around his neck, only older rust eating at the clasp. "They told me to keep my family out," I said. "They didn't give me a handbook for visitors." Kanoa laughed, a low, humorless bark. "Handbook. Jesus. You think this is a job? It's a covenant." The word landed heavy, foreign, like it shouldn't belong in an airport. "Covenant with who?" I asked. Kanoa tapped the skin at his throat where the collar bit. "You already know. That night the house punished me. I was walking the concourse silent, empty, too clean when the air turned sour. The vending machines blinked out. The neon signs sputtered in sequence, like eyes closing one by one. Then came the cats. Dozens of them, all sizes. Some sleek as shadows, others mangy and wrong, tails split into two. They padded out of the gates, their paws leaving no sound, circling me in silence. I froze. Remembered the first rule. Do not touch the cats. Do not name them. Do not stop walking. But the collar flared hot. My legs buckled. The book in my pocket burned against my thigh, forcing me to my knees. The cats drew closer. Eyes like green fire. Whiskers twitching, tasting me. And then her. Not the child this time. A woman's silhouette stepped through gate 14, draped in light too bright for the fluorescent halls. Face hidden, but her outline was unmistakable. Ears tall and pointed. A tail that flicked once, cutting the air like a blade. The cats parted for her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The collar spoke for her. Keeper, you are careless. Keeper, you brought blood of your blood inside the house. Keeper, you must pay. The collar tightened until spots burst in my vision. I clawed at it, desperate, knowing it was useless. Through the haze, I saw her raise one hand, slender fingers tipped with claws that gleamed like obsidian. She traced the air in front of me, carving something unseen. When she dropped her hand, the cats hissed in unison. The collar released. And etched across the inside of my wrist was a fresh mark, a small, perfect paw print, burned into the skin like a brand. I staggered back into Kanoa's office at dawn, holding my wrist. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. She spared you, he said. First warning. Next time, she won't. I wanted to ask why he never told me this was part of the job, why any of us were still here. But when I opened my mouth, the collar pulsed once, warning me not to speak. Kanoa saw the flicker in my eyes. He poured himself another cup of bitter airport coffee. You'll learn, kid, he said. We all learn. Eventually. But the brand on my wrist itched, and I knew it wasn't just a warning. It was a claim. Sleep never comes easy in that place anymore. The collar hums even when I lie perfectly still, like it's counting each shallow breath. After the punishment, I knew I couldn't just stumble forward blind. I needed answers. Kanoa wasn't going to hand them to me. And the logbook, God help, might have begun writing things I hadn't seen happen yet. Entries scratched across its pages about gates opening, about arrivals that never appeared on the public manifest. So I went digging. You wouldn't know Honolulu International had a basement unless someone told you. It isn't on the employee map, and if you ask directions, security will laugh you off. But I'd seen it once, in a half-forgotten corner of the baggage wing. A service door propped open with a cracked plastic wedge, leading down concrete steps that smelled of mildew and old seawater. That night, with the brand itching on my wrist, I took a flashlight and went. The air grew cooler as I descended. Too cool for Hawaii. Almost like I'd stepped into the crawlspace of a tomb. At the bottom, a locked gate. Chain and padlock. But the collar warmed against my throat, and when I pressed my palm to the cold iron, the lock snapped open on its own. The archive wasn't much, just rows of steel cabinets, paint peeling, labels half faded. But the papers inside told a different story. Newspaper clippings from the 1920s, describing feral cats overrunning the docks. Shipping manifests with entire crates marked simply sacred cargo and signed with Egyptian consular stamps. And tucked at the bottom of one cabinet, bound in leather older than anything else, a journal. Handwriting cramped, slanted, in ink that had browned almost to nothing. July 14, 1926. The goddess has chosen this threshold. Not the temples of our homeland, but this island crossroads of sea and sky. We are her keepers now. The collars bind us. Without them, the house would devour all who pass through. Pages and pages followed. Rituals disguised as guidelines. Instructions nearly identical to the ones I'd been given. But one line chilled me more than the rest. Never allow the keeper's bloodline to enter the house. The goddess claims them as her own. I snapped the journal shut, heart racing. Lonnie. Her boy. It wasn't just, family unsettles the house. It was a rule about inheritance. The collars weren't meant to stop with us. They were meant to pass down. The flashlight flickered. The hairs on my arms lifted. From deeper in the archive came the sound of purring. Not one cat. A dozen, maybe more. Slow, deliberate, surrounding me. I turned to run, journal clutched to my chest. But the stairwell door had closed itself. Locked from the inside. The collar tightened, not punishing, this time. Guiding. Forcing me back into the maze of cabinets. And there, in the farthest corner, I found a file stamped with red wax. HNL/Bastet/active. Inside, lists of employees. Every name with a date beside it. Some crossed out. Some still open. Kanoa's name was there. Mine, too. And below mine, a blank line. Waiting. I didn't tell Kanoa what I found. Not yet. But the journal is hidden in my locker now, under spare uniforms. And when the caller sleeps, I run my fingers over the words until I know them by heart. It's not just a job. It's a chain. One that wants to pass itself on. And the house won't be satisfied with me alone. I should have burned that journal the second I read it. But I couldn't. It felt like the first real piece of truth I'd been given since stepping foot into this nightmare. That night, the house punished me for keeping it. I was on my rounds near the cargo wing when I smelled it first, sweet, metallic, too strong for jet fuel. One of the containers had cracked open. A thick, dark liquid seeped across the concrete floor. At first, I thought it was oil. Then the flashlight caught the color right. Blood. Not animal, not human. Something heavier. It shimmered like molten copper when the light hit. And the cats were already lapping at it, dozens of them, tongues rasping like sandpaper. The logbook vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Fresh ink scrawled itself across the page. When the blood spills, you must not step in it. If you step in it, she will notice. If she notices, she will come. Simple. Direct. So I backed away, careful, trying to keep my boots dry. But the house wasn't satisfied. Keeper. It came from behind the container. Smooth, feminine. Ancient. I froze. My throat tightened with the collar's heat. She stepped into view, not fully, just a suggestion of a figure. Tall, lean, draped in linen that fluttered though no wind blew. Her face was hidden in shadow, but her ears were sharp, her tail swayed behind her. The cats stopped drinking. They turned their heads in unison toward me. "You found the journal," she said. Not a question. A statement. The collar pulsed once, punishing me for silence. "Yes," I whispered. She tilted her head, the way a cat studies prey before deciding whether to toy with it. "Then you know the covenant. You know what is owed." Her gaze shifted to my wrist, where the brand still burned. "One day," she purred, "he will wear it too." The blood spread wider, creeping like it had its own will. My heel bumped against the slick edge. The logbook screamed in my head, "Do not step in it." I wanted to scream back, "What about my nephew? What about my sister?" But the words caught in my throat. The collar wouldn't let me. It constricted, choking off my protest. Batet smiled without showing her face. The cats hissed softly, like laughter. And then, as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. The container sealed itself, the blood evaporated, the floor spotless again. Kanoa found me crouched in the cargo bay, gasping like I'd run a marathon. He didn't ask. Just tossed me a thermos of water and muttered, "You're starting to see the shape of it now." I wanted to grab him, shake him, force him to explain. But I saw his collar glow faintly in the dim light, and I knew it wasn't silence he chose. It was silence forced. We're all leashed dogs here. Guarding a gate we don't understand. And she's already looking at the next one in line. I should have left my phone in the locker. That's what Kanoa always said, "Out here, it's dead weight. The house doesn't like distractions. But when it buzzed in my pocket during the 3 a.m. round, I couldn't ignore it. The name on the screen froze my blood. Lonnie. I answered fast, whispering, "You can't call me here." The line was full of static. Through the hiss, I could barely make out her voice. "Something's wrong, he keeps waking up at 3:17. Static swallowed the rest. Then a sharp, high sound like a cat yowling. My ear throbbed from it. The call cut off. When I looked back at the screen, her name was gone. No missed call, no record in the log. Like it never happened. But the collar burned hot, hotter than ever before. Not punishing, not guiding. Just angry. I found Kanoa smoking by the service dock. He flicked the butt into the dark before I could speak. "She called you," he said flatly. I didn't ask how he knew. "She said my nephew's been waking at 3:17. Every night." Kanoa's jaw clenched. "That's the hour the house shifts. The veil thins. Sometimes it leaks." "What does that mean?" I demanded. He shook his head. "It means she's already marked him. The brand wasn't just for you." I grabbed his sleeve. "Then how do I stop it?" For the first time since I'd met him, Kanoa looked scared. Not tired. Not bitter. Just scared. "You don't," he whispered. "The covenant doesn't break. It only passes on." That night, on my last round, she was waiting. Not a toddler this time. Not 12. Closer to 17 now, tall and pale, hair long and black as oil. Her eyes caught the fluorescence wrong, too wide, too sharp. She sat in the middle of the concourse, knees pulled up, smiling like she'd been expecting me. "You shouldn't worry," she said. Her voice was layered, one part teenage girl, one part low feline growl. "He'll make a fine keeper." I felt my throat lock under the collar's heat. "Leave him out of this," I rasped. She tilted her head, feline. "Not my choice. Blood calls blood. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." The logbook vibrated in my pocket. I yanked it out. A new rule scrawled itself in jagged ink right before my eyes. If the child speaks, you must not answer. If you answer, the claim deepens. Too late. She grinned wider, showing too many teeth. "Keeper," she purred, "he already dreams of us." And then she was gone. The concourse was empty again, but I knew better. The house doesn't make threats. It makes promises. And now I'd broken another rule. The claim had deepened. I didn't start the night intending to bargain with a goddess. But the house doesn't ask what you intend. It asks what you'll sacrifice. The break room clock ticked louder than it should have. I sat across from Kanoa, staring at the burned paw print on my wrist. "She won't stop," I said. "Not until she's got him." Kanoa stirred his coffee, not meeting my eyes. "That's the covenant. It always runs down the line. There has to be a way." He finally looked up. His collar gleamed in the fluorescent light, pitted with rust. "There's one. But you won't like it." I leaned closer. "Tell me." He lowered his voice, like even the air could hear. "The house respects offering. If you give her something willingly, she might loosen her grip on him." "What kind of offering?" Kanoa didn't answer. He just slid a folded piece of paper across the table. A list. Handwritten. Items suitable for the house. The first two were easy: food, water. The last three weren't: memory, voice, years. At 2 a.m., the logbook snapped open on its own. New ink bled through the pages. "Keeper. Bring an offering to gate 5. The boy need not be claimed yet. The collar pulsed, hot and sharp, pressing me toward the concourse. I followed. Gate 5 was deserted. No announcements, no passengers. Just silence so heavy it bent the air. She was there. Not the child this time, the woman. Tall, elegant, wrapped in linen that shimmered like sand at night. Her ears twitched once, catching sound that wasn't there. The cats flanked her, eyes glowing green. "Keeper," she said. "You've tasted the covenant. You know what it costs. Will you pay, or will the house claim what it is owed?" I pulled the list from my pocket. My throat ached from the collar's heat. "What if I give you something else?" I asked. "Something that's mine." Her tail flicked lazily, slicing the air. "What you value most. That is the law." My mind raced. Memory. My voice. My years. The cats pressed closer, brushing against my legs. The collar throbbed. Finally, I whispered, "Take my years." She smelled a flash of teeth, sharp as a predator's. "So be it." The air went cold. My breath smoked in front of me. The collar dug deeper into my throat, and I felt it draw something out, not blood, not breath. Time. It slipped away in a rush, days, months, years. My bones ached, my muscles stiffened. My knees buckled. When the collar released, I was still standing. But my reflection in the glass gate door was wrong. The face looking back had gray at the temples. Lines carved around the eyes. Not old, but older. 5 years gone in an instant. Her voice purred from the shadows. "The boy sleeps soundly tonight. You have bought him time." Then she and her cats vanished. I stumbled back into the break room. Kanoa was waiting. He didn't ask what I gave. He just saw the change in my face and nodded, slow and heavy. 5 years, he said. Cheap, for now. I sat down hard, staring at my hands. They trembled like they belonged to someone else. I'd saved my nephew. But only for tonight. And the house never lets you stop paying. Morning hit like a hammer. I used to bounce back after night shifts, coffee, shower, a nap, good as new. Not this time. The 5 years she took sat on my chest like weight plates. Every step creaked in my joints. My reflection in the airport restroom mirror looked like it belonged to my father. The house hadn't just trimmed years off. It hollowed me. By noon, I'd made the mistake of answering Lonnie's text. She'd sent a picture of her son sleeping peacefully, timestamped 3:18 a.m. proof the offering worked. I replied before I could stop myself, "He's safe. For now." 10 minutes later, she called. "You sound old," she said. Not teasing. Scared. Her voice cracked when she added, "What did you do?" The collar burned hot, forcing silence. I couldn't explain. Couldn't even lie. Just hung up before it squeezed the breath out of me. Back in the break room, I slammed the logbook on the table. She took years, Kanoa. 5 of them. Just gone. He didn't look surprised. Didn't even flinch. Just sipped his coffee like it was water. "That's what you offered," he said. "You knew she'd take that much?" He shrugged. "I knew she'd take what she wanted. That's the point of an offering." I wanted to hit him. Wanted to break his rusted collar off and see if he'd finally scream. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. That night, the logbook didn't just hum, it shook. Pages flipped themselves until they landed on a blank spread. Words burned across both pages at once, scalding my hands as I read. "The house is hungry. Keeper, your offering is not enough. Bring more. Bring memory. Bring voice. Bring what makes you you." The collar tightened until I dropped to my knees. Then came the sound, the cats, yowling in unison, echoing through the entire terminal. It rattled glass, set alarms blaring. Lights flickered out gate by gate. And in the chaos, I saw her again. Not the woman. Not the child. Something in between, shifting, flickering, both and neither. Her silhouette stretched across the concourse wall like a shadow too large for the body casting it. "You fed me once," she whispered, layered, reverberating inside my skull. "Now feed me again. Or he will." When the light steadied, the airport looked normal. But my chest still heaved, and the logbook sat open at the demand, burned into the paper so deep the words tore through the page. She'd let me buy time with years. But now she wanted more. Memory. Voice. Pieces you don't get back. The collar throbbed. Waiting for my answer. The collar wanted me on my knees. The logbook screamed for more. But something in me snapped that night. Maybe it was the 5 years already gone, maybe it was Lonnie's voice on the phone asking why I sounded old. I wasn't ready to give her anything else. Not my memories. Not my voice. Not pieces of myself I couldn't explain away. So I refused. I closed the logbook hard enough to split the spine. The collar burned, but I gritted my teeth. "No," I said, out loud, voice cracking. "You don't get another piece of me." The air in the terminal changed instantly. It thickened, like humidity before a storm. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed until one by one they burst, raining glass across the polished floor. Then came the cats. Not dozens this time, hundreds. They poured from the gates, shadows spilling out of shadows, green eyes everywhere. Their paws made no sound. The collar cinched tight, but I forced myself upright. "I'm not feeding you anymore," I rasped. "Find another keeper." She answered. Not the girl, not the woman, both at once. Her body shimmered, flickering between forms, as if the house couldn't decide what shape she wanted to take. Her tail lashed once, loud as a whip crack. "You think you are strong," she purred, voice splitting into layers. "But you are only borrowed. Your time, your breath, even your defiance, they belong to me." The cats hissed, closing in. The collar squeezed tighter, black spots filling my vision. But I stayed standing. "Then kill me," I said. My voice was hoarse, shredded. "But you don't touch him." Her laugh was not human. The cats surged forward, a tidal wave of fur and claws. They didn't strike. Methy swarmed around, circling, brushing against my legs, my arms, my face. Their eyes burned so bright it hurt to look. The collar released suddenly, and I collapsed onto the floor. When I looked up, she was gone. So were the cats. But something worse remained. The logbook lay open on the ground. A new rule had burned itself across the page in jagged black ink. "If you refuse, the debt will pass to the boy." I sat there until dawn, shaking, staring at the words. I thought defiance would free me. Instead, it shackled him tighter. And now I had a choice I couldn't live with: give her another piece of myself or let her take him instead. Either way, the house wins. You think the worst part is the hunger, the claw, the cold that slides under your skin. You forget the other thing that will haunt you, how small it looks when it happens to someone else. I'd refused. I gave myself a moment of that brittle, stupid pride, paid the price of it, and the house answered by pointing its ledger at the one thing I could not barter away cleanly: family. Lonnie called in the morning, voice thin. He woke up crying at 3:17, she said. Said someone was whispering to him. Said a woman was at the window. My pulse dropped to a new shape. The clock in my kitchen read 9:02 a.m. I tried to tell her not to worry. The words sounded like paper tearing in my own mouth. At noon I went to her house. I told myself it was a check-in, procedural, make sure no harm, sort of thing. The collar hummed at my throat, it never liked family visits, and it made sure I felt it. Her son was small, still soft from baby fat. He slept with his thumb in his mouth on the couch, a blanket twisted around his knees. When he opened his eyes he didn't look at me, he looked past me as if he'd seen someone standing in the doorway behind me and recognized them like a lullaby. "Uncle," he said, and his voice carried an odd weight too resonant for a child, but I pushed it aside. Children's voices can be deep when they're scared. Then he looked at the window. His face changed the way a sky does before it storms, worry, and then something like longing. He tapped the glass and laughed in a small, flat way that I didn't trust. It sounded exactly like the giggle from the concourse, edged with cat tongue rasp. That night I watched him more than I watched the airport. I made my rounds faster, came home with coffee breath, sat in the doorway and listened to the quiet like an operative who had nothing else to do. Every time he slept his palms clenched and released as if holding something tiny and warm that thrummed. On the third night after my refusal, I woke to the sound of light scratching. He was at the window, fingernails worrying the frame in strange, adult motion, small arcs like someone practicing art. On his wrist, the skin was raised just under the braid of his bracelet. Not a brand full-sized like mine, but smaller, 3 fine lines, like a kitten's paw pressed in the flesh. I smelled sandalwood. A faint, familiar incense. My throat closed. The marks glimmered in the lamplight black beneath skin. The collar at my throat crawled hot, but this time it was not asking for another offering of years. It seemed to consider the ledger met, the debt had moved. "You're marked," I said, voice brittle. I knelt by him and touched the small lines with 2 fingers like testing a burn. He didn't cry. He smiled a little, then said in a voice that made my teeth ache, "She keeps me tidy." I tasted blood in my mouth. Not his. Mine. Old wounds. Old compromises. I called Kanoa. I demanded a meeting in the alcove. He came, slow as a man who knows the ledger and also the cost of flinching. "There's no surgical removal," he said, voice dry. "It's not a wound. It's a claim. Once inked, it binds." He tapped his own collar, like a metronome marking the inevitable. "You can slow the spread. You can distract the household. You can offer until she accepts another ledger entry. But you can't unmark him." Then what do I do? My hands were shaking. The years I'd lost felt like a mortgage note clutched too long. Kanoa looked me straight in the eye, and for a moment I saw a man still fighting to wear his own face. "Keep him away from thresholds," he said. "Windows. Gates. Don't let him see her. Keep the house at home tidy, she hates mess. Don't let him play near glass. And if she calls him by his whole name, don't let him answer." His voice cut like a report. Those are the only practical measures. I'd followed the rules so far. Half the power of the rules is that they are specific and learnable. You can match a wrong step to an accident and fix it. But this wasn't a workplace hazard you could tag and close. This was a slow transfer, a creeping tally. That night he had a dream he couldn't explain. He woke at 3:17 with the precise shape of a chant on his lips and noise like wind through teeth. He told Lonnie about it without fear, then reached for his toy as if nothing had happened. He could not keep from humming the cadence once it had left his mouth, and the tune lived in the walls like a draft. At the airport the next shift my own hands moved in ways I didn't expect. I logged extra patrols near the terminals that caught glare from the residential windows across the road. I checked the tarmac side where the shuttle buses passed. Anything to keep a human child from seeing a shape that was half goddess, half domestic deity leaning against glass. At 2:58 I stood by gate 12 and watched a reflection, not mine, kittens and curtains and a woman compose itself against the runway glass. The collar pulsed. I kept my head down. Counted. Walked. Reported sensor nominal. House settled. All told, I had changed the pattern of my work into a shield for somebody else's nights. That felt like the smallest, simplest kind of heroism you can have, keeping vigil so a child can sleep. When I opened the notebook later, a fresh line burned across the page. Debt forwarded. Keeper paid with years. Youth will be claimed in increments. Keeper may offset with voice or memory. It was an offer, bureaucratic and cruel. Pay the house what you will in exchange for delay. Keep a little of him, spend more of yourself. I went home and held the boy as if I could smother the mark with my palm. He rested his head on my shoulder and hummed a thin, mechanical purr. It sounded like something learning to memorize a tune. I thought of all the nights I'd walked the concourse, of the collar's weight, of the ledger's neat lists. I thought of the line in the journal I'd found in the archive. The goddess keeps a household tidy. She asks for tidy things, time, memory, voice. We trade. We survive. We remember by writing. I wanted to rewrite that sentence. I wanted to cross it out. I wanted to tear the ledger into pieces and scatter the ashes into the tarmac wind. Instead I counted to 10, folded my hands over the boy's small, marked wrist, and prayed like a man who has forgotten how to speak properly, for delay, for mercy, for whatever tiny loophole might still be left in the margin. She's patient. The ledger says so. And she will wait until a man finally decides which is worse, to keep his own history or keep a child's. When I read the new rule in the logbook that the debt would pass to the boy, I knew the house had cornered me. Batet had always been patient, precise, but this was different. This was personal. I couldn't let him grow up with that collar's weight already braided into his wrist. So I did the one thing I wasn't supposed to do. I planned to run. Not for me. For him. Lonnie thought it was just a trip. A surprise. I bought her and the boy tickets under a cousin's name, cash only, a domestic hop to Los Angeles. We drove to the airport in silence. Me at the wheel, her trying to keep the boy distracted with little games. He hummed to himself in the backseat too close to the chant I'd heard in the house at night. The sound made me grip the steering wheel harder. At the terminal I led them through check-in like a man on a mission. Every camera, every TSA scanner, felt like another set of feline eyes. And when we reached the gate, the air changed. The flight had a sudden maintenance delay. The boy's wrist burned red where the faint scratches were. He scratched at it, restless. Then, at 2:58, the announcements in the terminal cut out. No voices, just the hiss of dead air. The fluorescent bulbs flickered in a ripple from one end of the concourse to the other, like something pacing above the ceiling tiles. And then I heard it, a low, steady purr. Not from the speakers. From everywhere. She appeared not in full, never in front of everyone, not with that many strangers watching, but in the glass of the terminal windows. The sunset outside stretched too slow, too dark. Reflected there was not the runway but her shadow, half woman, half cat, eyes wide, teeth bared in a smile that wasn't human. She pressed one hand against the glass from her side, claws clicking once. The boy moved toward it without hesitation. His little hand rose like he'd been waiting all day to match hers. I grabbed him fast, pulled him away. He screamed like I was tearing something from him. Every passenger nearby turned to look. None of them saw her. They just saw a man yanking a child back from the window. But I saw the reflection's smile widen. We didn't board that flight. TSA asked questions. Lonnie glared at me in confusion and fury. When I got home, the logbook was already open on the desk. A fresh rule burned in. Do not attempt to flee. The house is wherever you keep your blood. The collar pulsed, not like punishment, like a reminder. Like a leash tugging me home. Lonnie stopped answering my calls for a week. She didn't understand why I'd dragged them to the airport, why I'd ruined the trip. But I knew. I couldn't smuggle him away. Not by land, not by sea, not by sky. She had already reached into him. And she wasn't letting go. The debt would keep coming due, no matter how many borders I crossed. And I'd learned something far worse than the weight of years, or silence, or blank memories. I'd learned there's no escaping a goddess who has already decided you are hers. I'd been bargaining in bad faith for weeks, years for years, voice for silence, always answering the ledger's rubric with whatever small currency I could scrape together. Everything I'd done had one central flaw: it treated the house like a thief. You don't bargain with a household god like you do with a man in a parking lot. You treat it like infrastructure. You study its maintenance schedule. So I tried the thing I knew how to do: I negotiated by procedure. Kanoa gave me the look of a man who'd had to teach rookies to fold thousands of contraband reports into a single, obedient ledger. He was all knots and tired iron now, but he still moved like someone who'd learned how to keep the way a machine is kept. "You want to talk to her?" he asked in the break room, stirring coffee that had gone bitter weeks ago. "That's not a negotiation. That's a test of endurance." "Tell me how," I said. I had the journal tucked under my arm, its pages memorized, the black basalt image burned like a watermark in my sleep. He exhaled. "If you insist, the only way that worked for us in the old days when treaties were new and men less clever was protocol. Show the house you respect the treaty's architecture. Demonstrate competence. Offer a ritual of maintenance instead of cheap gifts." He tapped a list on the table. Kanoa's handwriting was all capitals and margins. I copied it into my own head like a work checklist. "Approach at dusk, by the service stairwell, not the glass. Wear the collar but loosened, a keeper must remain accountable. Bring a ledger, not the notebook the house writes in, but one you keep your self-timestamps, actions, cleaning records. Offer maintenance, sweep the threshold, remove trash, repair something the house finds untidy. Speak in a measured form, the old names, the trappings of respect. Call her Batet, not goddess. Gods like titles, but they like household names more." "You do the mundane," Kanoa said. "She's a tidy thing. She takes tidy things." He spoke like a mechanic describing parts. So I did what working people do when rules save them. I prepared a checklist, I rehearsed a script, I set my watch to the hours I knew mattered. It was near dusk, airport light, the thin gray of a breath held. I walked the service stairwell alone. The collar at my throat was loose enough that I could wedge a finger under it. The marks on my arm pulsed like a low amp reading. At the bottom of the stairwell the basalt wall rose like a spine. The alcove smelled of old paper and sandalwood. The cat sat in waiting, not pouncing, only watching, tails curled like commas. The child figures were present too, but they remained in their ring, eyes wide, as if they were witnesses required by ordinance. I set my ledger on the low platformy own book, clean paper, fountain pen in the loop. I pulled a broom from the corner and began sweeping. The motion was ordinary, ordinary enough to anchor me. Stroke after stroke. Dust rose, then settled. The house watched. I spoke the name out loud once, soft as a machine booting, Batet. She answered from the glass beyond the service door, a shape folded into the runway light. The answer was not words at first, it was the sound of 100 little pads across tile. Kanoa had taught me to imagine right in terms of checklist: sweep the threshold, pick up the discarded wrappers, polish the glass, replace the burned bulb at gate 12. I did them. I logged timestamps with careful hand. I wrote down each motion as if it mattered because it did. 203 swept threshold. 210 removed water bottle, gate 7. 224 replaced faulty bulb on aisle 3. 238 polished glass at service door. The act of maintaining was humdrum, and that was the point. The house liked tidy things that ran on schedule. That's how covenants survive. You make the household virtuous by repetition, not by spectacular offerings. When I reached the last line 2:56 recorded, boundary cleared. I set the ledger on the stone, opened it, and folded my hands in front of me like a man marking attendance. She stepped through the glass that time without cracking it. Not fully part woman, part shadow, enough so I could see the arc of her cheek and the glint of her ears. Her eyes were two burnished coins. "You bring order," she said. Her voice was a low purr threaded with the click of fine machinery. "You sweep the floors. You tidy the thresholds." "I keep the ledger," I said. The phrase came out in my own voice, and also the voice that's better at reading rosters. "I record the hours. I patch burned bulbs. I seal leaks. I will keep the house tidy." She tilted her head. "You gave years," she observed. "Not a question. You refused voice. You refused memory." I started. I had argued with myself through the dark. Years had been cheap. Voice and memory were the ledger's real currency. If she wanted voice, what could I hand her that wouldn't unmake me? "Why?" I asked. "Because negotiators let the other side hear why you bow so they can calculate how to prod you." She stepped closer and smelled of warm stone. "Because you are not a tidy offering," she said. "You are a messy ledger. You ask questions. That is messy. We prefer compliance." I swallowed. "What if I keep the house tidy even more? Not only the terminal, your household, at the rocks, the basalt patch, the things you value. I will take inventory of the basalt. I will catalog the names. I will make schedules for the cats. I will perform your maintenance in full." She considered me, as a person might appraise a new appliance for fit. "Maintenance is repeated," she said. "Redundancy comforts us. But redundancy is boring. We learn to want novelty. We learn to want other margins that entertain." "Then let me pay with labor," I said, desperate pressure in the voice now. "Let me keep my memory. Let me keep my voice. Let me work for it. Let the boys sleep. Give me a schedule, hours, duties. I will sign." I spoke like a worker offering union hours. "Give me requirements I can satisfy." She smiled, teeth-like language. "You make a tidy case. Labor is tidy. But the covenant remembers the old terms." Her tail brushed a line on the stone and a spark ran along the seam. The child behind her chittered soft as papery wings. "Offer a probation," I said, pushing the practical heart forward. 7 nights. If I meet all tasks, no missteps, full maintenance, recorded logs, then the claim on the boy reduces by half. No more randomized marks. No more waking at 3:17. We document it. You get tidy. We keep our people. Silence folded around the alcove like a lid. The cat's breathing slowed. My ledger lay open, ink drying. Finally she spoke. "Proof." The word was bright and metallic. "If you promise labor, you will prove it. But proof is not paper alone. You will present witnesses." "Witnesses?" I echoed. She nodded once. "Kanoa. Another keeper from the ledger. One who has touched both sides, the concourse and the basalt. They will watch your hours. If you fail, the debt accelerates. If you succeed, the boy's claim is reduced. But remember, reduced does not mean released." The voice lost softness. "Do you accept?" I thought of 1,000 small daily tasks, keeping catastrophe away, walking the concourse, logging, polishing glass, and the ledger that took my years. I weighed them as a foreman weighs bad weather versus payroll. I accepted. "Do it," I said. On record. Kanoa didn't volunteer. Not because he didn't believe me, because he knew this covenant had teeth beyond the technicalities. He picked his witness with the slow calculation of a man allocating shifts. He chose the maintenance foreman, me, an old woman who'd been at HNL longer than most of the concrete had been poured. She'd once been a union rep and had hands that never trembled. When I asked why she agreed, she tapped her own collar and gave me the look of a woman who'd lost a son to a clocking out early. "Because this is what we do with bargains," she said. "We keep someone honest." She added, dryly, "Also because if she notices us all conspiring, she eats all our schedules and that won't be tidy for anyone. We set the parameters, clean and bureaucratic, nightly maintenance hours, a docket of tasks with times stamped, Kanoa and Maeve logging attendance, the journal kept in both our hands. Bastette's representative her cats and the child watched with barely concealed amusement. "You will be tested," she intoned. "The house likes tests." "I'm a worker," I said. "I pass tests." She smiled then, and this time it looked like pity. "We'll see." I left the alcove that night with my ledger heavier and my throat lined with a new kind of strain. I'd made a deal with something that reminded me of the ocean, patient, vast, indifferent. A contract with a goddess is not a contract in law, it's a living ledger that rewrites itself. But I had something she wanted, the rhythm of labor. On the drive home the collar lay warm under my shirt and the marks along my arm seemed quieter, like an animal at rest. I told myself I had won a little breathing room for my nephew. I told myself I had traded something I could repair me hours, my back, my sleep for things I could not memory and voice. Maeve called me once to say she'd be there at dusk. "Bring your broom and your dignity," she said. I laughed, briefly and then not at all. It sounded like someone starting a shift. When I went to bed, I slept, but not well. The ledger lay open on the nightstand, my pen clicked once then waited. I tried to write down the terms from memory and the letters slumped and smeared, as if my hand was already learning to make the neat, efficient script of someone who'd been shaped by this place. At 3:17 I woke because a light in my phone blinked. A message from Lonnie, he slept through. "Thank you." No further replies. No relief. The collar hummed like a machine satisfied for now. Tomorrow, I would start proving what I'd promised. I would sweep and log and polish until my hands obeyed the ledger again. And all the while I'd be counting the real cost, which I didn't yet know how to measure. The concourse looked normal to everyone else, fluorescent hum, tourists dragging surfboards in bags, families weighed down with Lay's and duty-free bags. But to me, it looked like a crucible. I had one rule drilled into my skull, keep it tidy. No excuses, no delays, no missed entries. Maeve and Kanoa trailed behind me like inspectors. Maeve with her clipboard, Kanoa with his silence. The collar felt tighter than usual. Not punishment, not reward, just a reminder. I started the log. 1902 began probation tasks. Maeve present. Kanoa present. At first it was easy. Sweep the threshold at gate 4. Clear a soda can wedged between seats at gate 7. Replace a flickering bulb above gate 9. I logged each one. Time, action, initials. By the book. The cats followed. Dozens of them. They padded silently along the carpet, watching every stroke of the broom, every wrapper dropped in the trash. Their tails twitched in rhythm with my heartbeat. The passengers didn't see them. Maeve did. She clicked her pen louder each time she marked my log, like she was trying to drown out the sound of their breathing. At 2011, the PA system glitched. A voice half static, half purse-spilled into the concourse. It didn't call for boarding. It repeated a single line. "You missed a spot." Passengers looked up, confused. Maeve gave me a sharp glance, then pointed at the far end of the gate. I jogged down. The floor there was clean. Polished. Nothing out of place. Until I looked closer. A smear of something tar, maybe blood, had seeped up through the carpet in a pattern. 3 streaks, like claw marks. The cat circled me, tails high, daring me to ignore it. I scrubbed it with everything in the cart. It didn't fade. It only sank deeper. Maeve leaned down, touched it with her pen, and frowned. "Log it anyway," she muttered. So I did. 2014 attempted cleaning of unknown substance, gate 12. Not removable. Recorded. The stain pulsed once, then stilled, as if satisfied. By 2100 hours, the crowd had thinned. Only a handful of red-eye passengers remained. I thought I was safe. Then a boy 5, maybe 6 wandered away from his parents and stood at the service stairwell. I froze. His posture, his tilt of head, it was the same as my nephew. He turned. His eyes glowed green in the dim light. The collar burned. Kanoa grabbed my arm hard. "Don't move." The boy opened his mouth. The voice that came out wasn't his. "You can't sweep the rot away." Then he blinked, and just like that he was an ordinary kid again, blinking up at me like I was the crazy one. His parents scooped him up without noticing a thing. The cats scattered, tails lashing. Maeve marked her clipboard without looking at me. By 23:37, my log was full. Every task checked, every incident recorded. I closed the ledger, signed my name, and slid it onto the basalt ledge at the stairwell. The collar cooled. A voice purred low from the dark. "Night 1, sufficient." Maeve lit a cigarette in the staff lot afterward. She didn't smoke it, just held it, hands shaking. "You understand," she said finally, "this isn't labor. It's liturgy." Kanoa only grunted. I couldn't speak. My throat felt shredded from holding back words I didn't want the house to hear. But in my chest, one thought kept circling, hungry as the cats. If this was only night 1, what would the others look like? I told myself night 1 had been a success. The ledger signed, the voice in the dark satisfied. But the truth was obvious the next morning. I saw it in the mirror first. Hair thinner. Skin sagged. My reflection carried an exhaustion deeper than missed sleep. The house hadn't just observed, it had collected. Lonnie texted me a picture of my nephew eating cereal, grinning with milk on his lip. For a moment, it steadied me. Then I noticed what was in his other hand, a plastic toy cat. One he didn't own. My chest locked tight. Maeve and Kanoa met me at the stairwell again. Neither spoke much. "Keep your log cleaner tonight," Maeve said finally. She doesn't like smudges. The cats were already waiting. Twice as many as the night before, lined up along the concourse tiles like soldiers awaiting inspection. Their tails flicked in unison. I started the list: sweep, clear trash, polish, replace bulbs. Easy, routine. Until the house decided otherwise. At 2022, the broom snapped. Not the handle, but the bristles, every strand shredded at once, like they'd been gnawed through by invisible teeth. I pulled out a backup. That one dissolved in my hands, wood splintering into dust. The cats hissed. Maeve stepped forward, calm as stone. She handed me her pen. "Write it," she said. So I logged. 2024 tool sabotage. Broom destroyed. Continuing with replacement method. I knelt and used my hands. Fingernails clawing at dust, sweeping crumbs into a pile, scooping wrappers barehanded. The humiliation was the point. The house wanted to see if I'd break. At 21:05, while changing a bulb, the ladder bucked beneath me. Not a wobbly and intentional shove. I hit the floor hard. The collar burned like molten wire, holding me down for a breath too long. When I looked up, Maeve and Kanoa hadn't moved. Witnesses, not saviors. That was their role. I dragged myself back up. Logged the fall. Replaced the bulb. The cats purred in approval. At 22:30, as I swept near the stairwell, the whisper came. Not through PA this time, straight into my head. He's learning faster than you. My nephew's laugh echoed behind the words. Not recorded, not remembered real. I dropped the broom fragments, staggered to the ledger, and wrote with shaking hand. 2231 heard voice of child. Source unconfirmed. The words bled on the page, ink pooling as if the ledger itself didn't want me to record it. By midnight the concourse was spotless. Not because of me, because the house willed it so. Every smear, every scrap, erased. The ledger slammed shut on its own. The voice in the dark purred again. Night 2, sufficient. But cracks widen. The collar cooled, but the ache in my bones didn't fade. Back in the lot, Maeve finally lit her cigarette and inhaled deep. You see now, she said through smoke. It's not just maintenance. It's erosion. I nodded. I could feel the cracks forming. Not just in me. In the boy, too. Because if Batet was speaking in my head, she was probably already speaking in his dreams. I drove to the airport with the windows down, hoping the humid air would clear my head. It didn't. My body still felt borrowed, like I was moving in slow motion while something else occupied the inside. Lonnie called while I sat in the lot. She told me my nephew had been sleepwalking. Found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., standing by the sink, whispering about the lady with the cats. I nearly turned the ignition and drove home. But the collar pressed against my throat like a reminder, my absence would kill faster than my presence. The cats were there before I even opened the service door. A wall of green eyes in the dark, their tails twitching. Maeve appeared from the stairwell, same cigarette, same blank expression. But Kanoa wasn't with her. Where's the big guy? I asked. She didn't answer. Just pressed the ledger into my hands. The cover felt warmer than last night. Almost pulsing. When I flipped it open, something new was waiting on the first page. Rule 6, do not speak the child's name while inside. It wasn't in Maeve's handwriting. The ink was darker, sharper, and carried a scent like iron. I asked her about it. She just shook her head. It means she heard you yesterday. By 2100 hours, things had already shifted. The house no longer played with broken tools. It wanted something deeper. The floor tiles rippled underfoot, swelling like water. Every step sank an inch too deep. When I pulled my shoes back, the soles were slick with something black and tar-like. The cats walked on top of it as though it were solid stone. At 22:15, I passed a window overlooking the runway. Instead of the blinking lights of planes, I saw a narrow alley lit by torches. Stone walls, hieroglyphs crawling as if alive. Bastet's temple. The reflection of another place layered on top of this one. I looked too long. My collar sparked, blinding white. My knees buckled. The cats hissed in chorus. At 2300 hours, the ledger opened itself. Words crawled across the page. Prove you belong. Leave something of your blood. I stared, frozen. The collar constricted. I pulled a paperclip from my pocket, straightened it, and stabbed the tip into my palm. Just enough to leave a red smear across the page. The ink drank it down, letters rippling in satisfaction. The collar eased. By midnight, I could barely stand. Maeve helped me outside, though her touch felt reluctant, almost disgusted. That's the last night of probation, she said. If you keep showing up, you're permanent. I asked where Kanoa went. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Sometimes the house takes one to test the others, she whispered. This time it wasn't you. When I finally checked my phone in the car, there was a new voicemail from an unknown number. I played it on speaker. My nephew's voice. Uncle, don't come back tomorrow. She says you're too loud. She says if you keep sweeping, she'll just use me instead. The message ended in a low, rumbling purr. I should have gone home. Should have walked straight into Lonnie's apartment, scooped up my nephew, and taken them as far from Honolulu as the money in my pocket could carry us. But I didn't. The collar was still hot against my throat. It knew my thoughts. It tightened when I pulled into the H1 exit that would have taken me home. Loosened only when I turned back toward the airport. That was the night I understood, the job wasn't optional anymore. Maeve met me at the stairwell as usual, though this time she didn't hand me the ledger. "It's yours now," she said. She meant permanently. The cover was different when I picked it up, heavier, with a fresh mark burned into the leather. My initials. Not written. Scarred into the hide. When I opened to the first page, the rules weren't 6 anymore. The numbers stretched down like they had no bottom. Each line waiting to be filled by something yet to happen. I closed it fast, nausea rising. No fake sabotage this time. No games. At 20:45, the loudspeakers flickered on, though the PA system had been cut from power hours ago. A voice purred through. "North Wing. Gate 13. Now." Maeve didn't follow. She just said, "It'll be yours alone, from here." I carried the broom like a weapon and walked. The air grew heavier the closer I got. It smelled of heat and fur, like a zoo enclosure left uncleaned. The cats lined both walls, silent. Watching. Guiding. The gate door, locked since the early 2000s, hung open a crack. Beyond it wasn't the tarmac. It was sand. Endless black sand stretching into darkness. The collar throbbed. I wrote it down in the ledger. 2102 Gate 13 open to sand expanse. Proceeding under directive. The ink shimmered, approving. Something moved in that desert. Low, sleek, impossible to focus on. My head filled with 1,000 whispers layered together, all saying the same word. Blood. The ledger's page glowed faintly, awaiting confirmation. I pulled the pen, pricked the same wound in my palm, and smeared it across the margin. The sand drank it instantly. And the shadow solidified. A cat the size of a horse stepped forward, golden eyes burning. Bastet not in statue form, not in whisper, but in flesh. Her mouth opened. Rows of human teeth. "You will clean what I leave unclean. You will guard what I hunt. You will not refuse." The collar burned white hot, then cooled to nothing. It had served its purpose. Now she didn't need it. When I blinked, I was back in the terminal, Gate 13 sealed as if welded shut. The cats dispersed into shadow. I checked the ledger. My hand had written a new rule I didn't remember forming. Rule 7, when summoned to the sand, do not hesitate. Bleed, write, and obey. I slammed the book closed. In the parking lot, Maeve wasn't waiting. No witnesses tonight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A picture message from an unknown number. My nephew again. Standing barefoot in the kitchen at home. His toy cat gone. In its place, the exact same ledger, scaled to his small hands. The text read, "He's training too." I didn't sleep that night. Not after seeing the photo. But Lonnie texted me at dawn, he had another episode. Talking in his sleep. "I think he said your name. I think he said hers too." I nearly called. Nearly told her everything. But the ledger pulsed in my duffel, and I knew the house was listening. So instead, I drove to her place and just watched. Watched my nephew through the glass of his bedroom window. He wasn't sleeping. He was sitting up in bed, turning the pages of a small, black book. My book. Shrunk to fit his hands. And the cat's feral ones from the street were lined up on the sill outside, staring in, tails flicking in rhythm. Later, when he came over for breakfast, I asked him quietly if he'd been reading anything lately. He looked at me, dead serious in that way kids shouldn't. They give me rules too. I froze. What kind of rules? He thought for a second, then rattled them off like multiplication tables. Don't lock your window. Don't look at the cats' mouths. Don't say the lady's name out loud. Don't tell mom what you see. His voice was steady, memorized. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just teaching me. She was doubling the lesson. That night, I stayed at Lonnie's place. Said I'd crash on the couch, just in case. She was too tired to question it. At 2:47 a.m., I heard the shuffle of small feet in the kitchen. My nephew stood by the fridge, holding his little ledger. The light from the open door painted his face pale. Behind him, stretched across the linoleum, was a shadow that wasn't his. Long ears. Curved claws. A tail that twitched once, twice, in time with his breaths. I whispered his name before I could stop myself. The shadow froze. His eyes snapped to mine. You can't say that here, he whispered back. She told me so. The air in the kitchen changed. Heavy, hot, like breath against my skin. I grabbed him, pulled him close, shut the fridge door. The shadow vanished, but the smell of fur and copper lingered. When I checked his ledger because I had taught, here it was. Rule 5. If Uncle says your name at night, don't answer him. He isn't Uncle then. My blood ran cold. Because I had said it. And he had answered. Batet wasn't just binding me to the house. She was binding him to me. And if I broke too many rules, it wouldn't be my body that paid the price. It would be his. I stopped pretending I could keep the job separate from home. Every night, the ledger in my duffel throbbed faintly under my hand. Every morning, my nephew woke with dark smudges under his eyes and new cat scratches on his arms that faded by breakfast. The rules were synchronizing. I could feel it. The handwriting in my ledger had started to shift thin, slanted strokes creeping in between my block letters. It looked like his. And when I peeked at his little ledger on his nightstand, the scrawl between his childish printing looked like mine. Batet was braiding us together. On my fourth official night, Gate 13's door was open again. Sand beyond, torches flickering. The page in my ledger read. Bring the small one. I froze. My throat locked. The cats in the terminal hissed softly in chorus. Not threatening waiting. At the same time, my phone buzzed. Lonnie. A text. He's up again. He keeps saying you're calling him. I wasn't. I wrote in my ledger instead. Child stays home. Worker obeys alone. The ink beaded on the page. Refused to sink. I stepped through Gate 13 anyway. Alone. The black sand stretched out under a sickly green sky. The torches marked a path toward a low stone altar, etched with hieroglyphs I could almost but not quite read. The cats padded around me in a loose circle. Behind me, the door of the gate shrank to a dot of light. And there she was. Not the cat the size of a horse from before. This time she was taller than a man, slender, her head unmistakably feline, eyes like molten gold coins. Batet in full, temple-born form. She didn't speak with a voice. The words pressed into my skull like heat. He is ready. Bring him, and you may leave. I felt the collar return not on my neck, but on my heart. It pulsed in time with my nephew's breathing miles away. I forced myself to answer out loud, voice shaking. No. The sand under my feet boiled. The cats hissed louder, tails whipping like whips. The ledger in my hand burned hot enough to blister my palm. Then you will stay longer. And she was gone. When I stumbled back through gate 13, the airport was empty. No Maeve. No Kanoa. Even the cats were gone. I opened the ledger. My blood smeared across the page without me even touching it. New words formed. Rule 8, refusal is work. Refusal carries its own hours. My shift clock read 2:11 a.m. But the terminal windows showed dawn. Time had broken. I drove to Lonnie's apartment at sunrise. My nephew was waiting on the porch, barefoot, his small ledger clutched to his chest. "She says you're tired," he whispered. "She says I can help you sweep." His eyes weren't his anymore. They glowed faintly in the light. I knelt, gripping his shoulders. "You're not coming to the airport. Do you understand?" He blinked. For a moment, his own brown eyes flickered back. "She says rules are rules," he murmured. "But maybe we can make a new one." I spent the whole day pacing Lonnie's small apartment, watching my nephew draw cats on scrap paper. Dozens of them, tails curling into strange shapes. He hummed a tune I didn't recognize, something too old for a child to know. But his words stuck with me, "Maybe we can make a new one." It hit me then. The rules had never been absolute. They'd been written by hands before mine. The ledger wasn't holy scripture, it was a record. A contract. If others could add rules, maybe I could too. So that night, before the shift, I tested it. I opened my ledger and wrote. Rule 0, the child will not enter the house. The ink shimmered, fought me, then sank slowly into the page. For a moment, the air smelled clean salt, ocean breeze, nothing more. I let myself believe. But the cats knew. When I walked into the concourse, they weren't lined up neat like soldiers anymore. They circled me, hissing, swiping their claws against the floor until sparks flew. The PA system snapped alive with feedback. Bastet's purr filled the air. "You think you can write where I walk? You are mine. He is mine. Rule is mine." The ledger burned in my grip. The new line I'd written bled across the page, dripping red like an open wound. At 21:30, the lights cut. The whole terminal went black. Only their eyes remained, dozens of green flames floating in the dark. The collar came back around my throat, tighter than ever. A whisper crawled into my skull. "If he cannot enter, then you cannot leave." And suddenly, every exit sealed. The glass doors became stone. The stairwell bricked over. Even the service corridors ended in walls that hadn't been there before. The house was locking me in. At 22:15, I heard knocking. Not from inside. From outside the terminal windows. My nephew. Standing barefoot on the tarmac. His little ledger clutched in his hand. His lips moving as if reciting something I couldn't hear. The cats swarmed toward him, scratching at the glass but not breaking it. The barrier held for now. I slammed my palm against the window. "Stay out," I shouted. "Don't listen to her." His small voice carried faintly through the glass. "She says I can open it if I write." Desperation hit me like lightning. I ripped the pen from my pocket, scrawled fast, hand shaking. Rule 9, the boy's writing cannot bind the house. The ink screamed across the page, the letters twisting like they wanted to crawl off the paper. And outside, my nephew froze. His ledger snapped shut in his hands, hard enough to make him flinch. For the first time, the cats scattered. Hissing, furious, their tails whipping as they melted back into shadow. When the lights flickered back on, he was gone. The tarmac empty, the night still. My phone buzzed. A text from Lonnie, "He just came back inside. He looks tired but he's fine. Said he was dreaming." But I knew better. The house had felt my rebellion. And Batet would not let it stand unpunished. The ledger pulsed once more, and new words formed without my hand. Rule 10, every rebellion costs double. I hadn't seen her in nights. Thought maybe she'd vanished like Kanoa. But there she was at the stairwell, cigarette glowing faint orange in the dark. You tried to write your own rule, she said flatly. No greeting. No smile. I didn't answer. She tapped ash onto the tile. You think you're the first. The house eats rebels. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Depends how clever they think they are. I wanted to ask about Kanoa. But before I could, she pressed the ledger back into my chest. Tonight's yours, she said. But you're not paying alone. The ledger opened by itself, pages flicking like cards in a shuffled deck. It stopped on fresh ink. Tonight, 2 workers. 1 ledger. 2 costs. The collar didn't hit my throat this time. It wrapped around both of us. Maeve staggered, grabbing the wall, cursing under her breath. I felt it immediately, the tether. Her heartbeat against mine. Her breath inside my chest. If one of us faltered, both would. Bastet's punishment. At 2100 hours, the PA croaked alive. A single word, distorted but clear. Split. The cats swarmed, herding us down opposite corridors. Maeve toward the north wing, me toward the baggage tunnels. We tried to fight it, but the tether pulled taut like a wire, cutting into my ribs. If I resisted, she choked. If she slowed, my knees buckled. So we obeyed. The baggage tunnel stank of rot. Piles of luggage that should have been cleared decades ago bulged with movement inside. I didn't want to look too close. The ledger glowed faintly, words forming as I walked. Unzip them. Sweep what crawls out. My stomach turned. But the collar constricted, and I obeyed. The first bag twitched as I pulled the zipper. Something black and wet spilled onto the concrete, half cat, half human faces, all teeth, all hissing. They scattered into the shadows, but the broom worked. One sweep and they dissolved into ash. The ledger purred. Halfway through, I heard her faint but raw, echoing through the tether. Don't stop. Don't you dare stop. They're making me cut the tongues off the statues. Her voice cracked. I felt her pain as if my own mouth bled. The collar tightened in rhythm. I swept harder, faster, choking on the dust. By 2300 hours, the tunnel was empty. Just me, broom in hand, lungs burning. The tether pulled me back to the terminal. Maeve was already there, blood on her shirt, shaking but alive. The ledger snapped shut. On its cover, 2 new marks were burned into the leather, her initials beside mine. Permanent. She lit another cigarette with trembling hands. Now you see. Costs double. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about my nephew. If Batet could bind me to Maeve, what stopped her from binding me to him? When I pulled into Lonnie's lot, I saw him sitting on the curb, pajama pants dirty, bare feet dusty. His little ledger open on his knees. He looked up, smiling faintly. They said I don't need to dream anymore, he whispered. I can work awake now. I carried him inside, heart pounding, but he wasn't tired. His eyes glowed faintly, pupils wide like an animal's. He opened his little ledger and showed me. A new line had appeared since the night before, written in the same black iron ink that haunted mine. Rule 6, when the cats come to the window, let them in. I snapped the book shut, too late. Scratches rattled across the glass sliding door, claws dragging in perfect rhythm. 1 2 3. 1 2 3. Lonnie stirred in the bedroom, muttered something in her sleep. Didn't wake. The boy pressed his palm to the glass. The locks unlatched by themselves. 3 cats slipped inside. Not feral strays, not airport shadows. These were larger, shoulders as high as my nephew's chest, with eyes glowing molten gold. Their tails twitched in unison, like metronomes. The boy stroked the nearest one's head. His fingers didn't bleed even when it purred, even when its teeth brushed against his skin. "They said to show you," he whispered. "They said you need to learn faster." The cats all turned to me. Waiting. The boy opened his ledger again. Another line burned into the page as we watched. Rule 7, sweep the floor before dawn, no matter where you are. He handed me his toy Broma plastic one from a dollar store, sticky with age and dirt. "You have to help me," he said. "They won't let me sleep unless it's clean." And damned if the air didn't change the room heavy, buzzing, like the terminal at its worst. I grabbed the toy broom. It felt like lead in my hands. So I swept. Each stroke dragged shadows out from under the furniture. Long fingers, tails, slinking shapes. The cats devoured them one by one. By the time the first streak of light hit the curtains, the floor was spotless. And my nephew finally yawned. His eyes dimmed back to human. When I checked my own ledger after sunrise, my stomach dropped. A new rule had etched itself in my handwriting, though I hadn't touched a pen. Rule 11, the house is everywhere. I called Maeve before my shift. She answered on the second ring, voice hoarse, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "You feel it, don't you?" she said. "The walls aren't walls anymore. Once you drag the rules outside, there's no putting them back." I told her about my nephew. About his awake task. Silence on the line. Then. That's how they make replacements. One day, he'll sweep better than you. Faster. With less fight. And when that happens. Her voice cracked. You'll be gone, and he'll still be here. That night at work, the cats didn't greet me. The terminal was empty, silent, every light humming like it was about to burst. But when I opened the ledger, the page wasn't blank. My nephew's handwriting was scrawled across it. "See you soon, Uncle. She says we'll work together tonight." When I clocked in, the supervisor barely looked at me. He just waved me through, muttering something about extra hands. And there he was, me nephew, standing by the checkpoint with a little security badge clipped to his shirt like it belonged there. His ledger dangled from a string around his neck. "Uncle," he said, like it was normal. Like this was just another school day, and he was waiting for me to walk him inside. I asked him who gave him the badge. He shrugged. She did. The house felt different with him next to me. The air pressed heavier, the lights dimmer. It was like the walls leaned closer to hear him breathe. We were assigned to gate 12. The same cursed one where the scratching used to come from. The glass shimmered like heat off asphalt, though the night outside was cool. He opened his ledger. 2 lines glowed bright. Rule 6, when the cats come to the window, let them in. Rule 7, sweep the floor before dawn, no matter where you are. He nodded at me. We're supposed to wait. Midnight. A rattling at the glass. Not claws this time, fingernails. Long, deliberate. The boy lifted his palm, same as before. The locks clicked free without him touching them. The door slid open. A woman stepped through, tall and thin, dressed in rags that shimmered like torn curtains. Her eyes were the color of desert sand, and her smile showed rows of cat's teeth. "Little priest," she cooed to the boy. Her voice purred, low and endless. "And the uncle who resists. Batet. Not the goddess carved in museums. Something older, leaner, hungry." She dropped a broom at our feet. Not plastic. Not wood. This one was bound reeds, darkened with dried blood at the bristles. "You clean for me," she said. "Or you feed me." The boy picked it up like it weighed nothing. He started sweeping the tiled floor of the gate, humming under his breath, some melody I swear I'd heard in the static of the radios. And everywhere his broom passed, shadows peeled loose. The cats followed, devouring each one in silence. My book burned hot in my pocket. I pulled it out. New lines carved themselves across the page. Rule 12, do not stop sweeping while the children work. Rule 13, if Batet speaks to you directly, do not answer her name. I pressed my lips shut, throat dry. She leaned down close, her face inches from mine, those teeth gleaming. Say it, she whispered. Say who I am. The boy's broom scratched faster, frantic. Shadows writhing at his feet. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought it would crack. Said nothing. Her laugh shook the glass in its frame. By dawn, the floor was spotless, glowing faintly as if polished with moonlight. The boy dropped the broom, exhausted, his eyes dimming back to human. Batet faded with the shadows, but her voice lingered, echoing in the rafters. Keep him awake. He learns faster than you. The supervisor stamped my logbook as if nothing unusual had happened. No mention of the child worker, no mention of the broom or the woman. But when I got home, my nephew's little toy broom was gone. In its place, leaning against the doorframe, was the reed broom stained dark. And the ledger showed a final note at the bottom of the page, not in my hand, not in his. Rule 14, 2 sweeps are better than 1. The next shift, there was no pretense. The supervisor slid 2 clipboards across the counter, one with my badge, one with my nephew's. His tiny photo stapled crooked to the top. Team rotation, the supervisor said without meeting my eyes. House likes pairs. No protest, no outrage. Just that. And the weight of it landed like stone in my chest. I found Maeve in the break room, face drawn, cigarette smoldering even though the smoke detectors blinked red above her. You didn't tell me, I hissed. She didn't even look surprised. Didn't need to. I saw it the second you brought him in. Once the house sniffs family, it doesn't let go. They don't waste training hours. They pick the next worker young. What happens to the old ones? I asked. Her eyes flicked up to mine, gray and dead tired. You already know. We were stationed at baggage this time, past midnight. Empty belts, humming conveyors. The air thick with dust that moved like something breathing. The boy set down his ledger. 2 fresh lines glowed. Rule 15, teams must sweep together, never apart. Rule 16, if one falters, the other must finish. He didn't look at me. Just picked up the reed broom and started. The belts roared alive. Luggage tumbled out, battered leather suitcases that didn't belong to anyone living. Some rattled like bones inside. Some wept. Each bag that hit the ground split open, shadows spilling across the tiles like oil. The boy swept, and the broom dragged the darkness back, thread by thread. The shadows hissed but retreated. My turn. The broom was heavier now, handle slick like it had been dipped in sweat. I pushed it across the ground, and the dark shrieked like metal on glass. Together, we cleared the first wave. The belt stopped. Silence swallowed the room. From inside one of the suitcases, a low purr began. Not feline, not earthly. The case bulged, seams tearing. Golden eyes burned from within. The boy froze. I grabbed the broom. Keep sweeping. I shouted. Don't stop. He obeyed, trembling, his strokes clumsy but steady. The suitcase split, and Batet crawled out half woman, half cat, all teeth. Her body stretched, bones cracking like whips. 2 sweeps, she hissed, circling us. 1 to train, 1 to replace. Show me which is which. The belt spat out 1 final bag. Bigger than the rest, heavy enough to slam against the tiles with a crash. The ledger flared. Rule 17, only one may sweep the last shadow. The boy looked at me. Uncle. I didn't let him finish. Snatched the broom, drove it across the floor toward the bag as it split. The shadow that poured out was enormous, a column of night reaching the ceiling. It reared back, claws sparking against steel beams. The broom burned my hands, but I didn't stop. I forced it forward, every muscle screaming. The darkness howled and broke apart, scattering like smoke. When the tiles cleared, Batet was gone. The boy sat on the floor, chest heaving. His ledger lay open, blank again except for one smoldering line. He cannot protect you forever. I closed it, hard, before he saw. We had 20 minutes before our next round, and Maeve cornered me behind the vending machines, away from the cameras that always hummed too loud when you spoke the wrong words. You're paired now, she said flatly. Same as I was. Her hands trembled as she lit another cigarette. The flame flared too bright for a moment, shadows twitching against the wall. She cupped it with both hands like it was the only warmth left. You think it's new? She shook her head. This has been happening for decades. The house has always needed partners. They say it's balance. But it's really a replacement line. They train the young on the bones of the old. She pulled a worn photograph from her pocket. A girl, maybe 12, with short hair and eyes too big for her face. Maeve's arm draped protectively around her shoulder. Both smiling, both alive. This was Kira, she said. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. My niece. She wanted to visit me at work one night. I thought one night wouldn't hurt. She sat with me at the checkpoint, coloring in a notebook while I did rounds. Her eyes glazed, staring at the photo like it might open into the past. The notebook wasn't hers when we left. It was the ledger. Same as your boy. Maeve's story spilled out, jagged and broken. The cats at the glass. The broom appearing. Kira laughing at first, calling it a game. She was better than me, Maeve whispered. So much quicker. The house liked her. Her hands tightened on the photo until it bent. Then one night, the rule changed. Said only one could sweep the last shadow. I thought I could shield her. I grabbed the broom. But the damn thing burned through my hands. It wasn't meant for me anymore. Maeve lifted her palms, showing faint scars like rope burns. She finished the sweep. Perfectly. And when the light came back, Batet was smiling. I was standing in an empty room. My niece was gone. Maeve leaned close, voice low and fierce. You need to hear me, kid. They don't take them by force. They train them until the house decides the child is ready. And then poof. You're left holding memories and a broom that won't obey you anymore. I swallowed hard. So what do I do? How do I stop it? Maeve shook her head. You can't stop the rules. But you can bend them. Twist them back. I tried too late. You've still got a chance. When I got back to my station, my nephew was sitting on the bench, legs swinging. His ledger was open in his lap, pen scratching by itself. I leaned over to read. Rule 18, do not trust the one who tells you about loss. He looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. She's lying, uncle. Batet said so. The ledger burned hot in my nephew's hands, pages flipping like a storm. The words wrote themselves, sharp and black. Rule 19, tonight, the uncle must step aside. The boy looked at me, nervous but expectant, as if he wanted me to agree. As if he wanted me to say it was okay. And maybe if I'd let it happen I could have gone quietly. But Maeve's story dug into my ribs. Her niece swallowed whole by the system. That couldn't be my ending. Not for him. At gate 12, she came, purring through the glass, slipping inside like smoke. Her eyes burned like twin suns, her smile wide enough to split her face. "Little priest," she said to the boy. "Tonight you take your place. Tonight the work becomes yours alone." The broom appeared in her hand. She held it out, bristles still glistening with shadow. "Sweep," she whispered. "Let him watch." The boy reached for it, trembling. His ledger blazed white-hot. I grabbed the broom first. The handle seared my palms, skin blistering instantly. But I held on. The floor split open, shadows spilling like floodwater. The cats poured from the cracks, dozens, hundreds, circling, hissing. The rule screamed in my head, "Step aside. Step aside." But I swept. Every stroke ripped at me, tearing strength from my bones, heat from my blood. The shadows fought back, slamming against my chest, clawing at my throat. My arms shook with every pass. Still, I swept. The broom cracked in half. The shadows roared up, swallowing the ceiling, the walls, the cats themselves. Batet shrieked, furious, her form flickering between woman, cat, and something vast and starless. The boy screamed my name. And then silence. When I came to, I was on the floor, chest heaving. The ledger lay open beside me. One line burned bright across the last page, new, unseen until now. Hidden rule: if you break the system and survive, the house must choose again. The boy sat next to me, crying, his hands empty. No broom. No ledger. His little badge gone. "Uncle," he whispered. "I don't hear her anymore." The shift ended. Just like that. Lights humming, silence returning. The supervisor stamped my book without a word, but his hand trembled. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Maeve caught me in the lot after. "You did it, didn't you?" she rasped. "You broke it." I nodded, still tasting ash in my mouth. Her laugh was raw, bitter, but real. "Then she'll hate you forever. That's the price." I tucked my nephew into bed that morning. No ledger on his nightstand. Just his toy broom, plastic and harmless again. When I got home, my own ledger sat heavy in my bag. Blank pages left, waiting. But across the cover, carved deep into the leather, a single word now burned. Traitor.